Oh, I gotta turn the music off.
Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to Drawing Down the Dragon. I'm Snappy, and thank you for joining me for Occult Explorers. And I'm joined today by my dear friend Leslie. How's it going, Leslie?
Good, how you doing?
Life is beautiful, and we're joined as well by our dear friend Shay. How's it going, Shay?
Hello, how you going?
In the mystical
I'm good.
library behind her.
Wow,
Mm.
yeah, that is quite the library. I love it.
Oh, that's the Temple Air Space Library. We've got three other rooms like that,
Glorious, glorious.
and I've had to cull when I shifted. I culled like a third of my books when I shifted. So yeah.
That's always how it is, isn't it? Books are way too heavy. I
Yeah.
remember last time I moved, I had like 2 or 3 totes of books, and that's when I
Mhm.
finally was like, "Okay, I'm gonna get rid of a
Mm.
lot of what I got rid of were like a lot of the fiction books, a lot of the
Mhm.
paperback that it started to throw away, but I was like, I
Yeah.
can't keep lugging this stuff around anymore."
Yeah. Yeah. I've got
But yeah,
this is the spiritual library. We have a healing room. So we have a healing library in the healing room. And then we've
Nice.
got like a how-to in the office.
that's glorious. That's glorious.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, I'm really excited about this is going to be a really, really fun episode. But before we begin, of course, trigger warnings to everyone. We're going to be getting into some ancient magic, some wildness, and of course, this is all coming from our own personal perspectives. So take it for what it is and make up your own decisions, right? But Leslie came to me earlier in the week with this wonderful idea to do a deep dive into alchemy. So you're going to present to us a wonderful presentation. Why don't you talk to us a bit about alchemy and what inspired you to want to talk to us today?
Well, actually it started when we were talking about love magic, and Shay said no, it's actually very predictable.
I can't hear Leslie.
Uh-oh.
Can you hear Leslie?
Yeah, I can hear her.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
that's weird. Okay, let me I'm
Can you
not
you
sure.
can't hear anything? No, I guess not.
See, say something again, Leslie.
Romantic relationships follow the alchemical process.
Right.
And so when Shay says predictable, I was like, oh yeah, sure, it follows the alchemical process. But so does everything else. And all
Right.
magical systems are based
Yeah.
on the
I
alchemical process
wonder if it's
because
just
our
my
relationships are
settings.
in
Is
our
anybody who's
creative
watching us, can they
processes.
hear Leslie?
I think everyone can hear Leslie. Pretty sure everyone should be able to hear her. So it must be your
Yeah, we've got a
settings.
couple of people saying I can. Yeah. What's going on?
Yeah.
Okay, let me have a look. I have a quick look. I might have to duck out, come back in again.
Okay.
All right. Well, you take a quick look at your settings and yeah.
Hmm.
So, as you were saying, love magic is a part of alchemy, but everything is related to alchemy, right?
Well, the alchemical process is based on observing nature and observing ourselves, and they
Right.
figured it out. There's a process that happens. Our creative process is the same process that our relationships follow. It's the same process that we make medicine with, that we make food with, that eventually we discover physics with.
Can you
And
hear our dear friend Leslie?
Yep, I
you
got
got
it.
me?
I've got it.
Oh,
I've
goody.
got you
Oh,
back. I've got you back.
And so I
right.
thought I'd start with the people, the alchemists, and then next time we'll get into. I'm gonna make it real simple. The alchemical process is a finite thing that anyone can learn, and it's a step we skip. Like we jump into these complex magical traditions, and we don't look at at what they're all based on. And we don't because it's all been occulted because it was illegal for so long that we have all these symbols, and the green dragon is sulfuric acid. It's really just chemistry. It's not mystical. It was occulted and mystified because it
Mm,
was
Mhm.
illegal for 1,000 years. So
mm,
Well,
mm.
uh
I see them all as interrelated. I don't see them as anything separate. And I think,
no, in
yeah,
fact, this is the whole thing. The For something to be true for in ancient Egypt, right? It has to it has to be inspired. It has to make sense. It has to be communicable. It
Mhm,
has to feel right.
mhm,
It has to sit well, and it has to check out in the lab.
mm.
And
It's
if
got to
any of
produce.
those are missing, it's not
Yeah,
true,
yeah. It's
right?
got to produce
So
real results, or it's not right.
these people clearly could have built the Aswan Dam and did not because it didn't check out on all levels.
Mm,
well, you know what this is that what we've seen is I think this is comes from a modern interpretation and understanding of magic. And not that there's anything wrong with the modern, more chaos oriented systems, but like a
mm,
chaos oriented and magical system is all about the radical reshaping of belief. And they're about playing with ideas. And it's become at this point so separated from nature and from the body. In fact, you'll see a lot of these theorists, like the early chaos guys, like Austin Osman and Spar, utterly just reject belief entirely, reject everything outside of himself. And this
This is not
is
chemistry. You're not making anything. What are
no,
you
no,
doing?
no, but they're doing a different type of enlightenment magic that is about creating belief through their own symbol set and systems,
This is
right?
Jung's fault.
Yeah,
mm. Yeah.
I don't even know how much he read of Jung. He's kind of a wild artist guy. This also goes back to a lot
I
of
almost
primal,
missed it.
primordial ideas of magic. So much about magic is creating the fancy,
Mm,
being in those realms of play and childlike wonder. But
mm,
what I'm trying to get at is that a lot of us now are seeing things through a more chaos, Austin Spare orientated lens, or people like
At
Carol, we
some
have lost
point,
the more natural
science
bodily stuff.
separated
Yeah.
from spirituality, and
mhm,
it that is problematic.
mm,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So these
Absolutely,
are
right?
all efforts to reweave it together.
mm.
But the fact
Yeah.
is, if you don't do your lab work, what are you doing?
exactly.
It
And I
has to
believe,
check out in the lab. You have to see it. And Jung didn't do any lab work at all. Only lab work he did was experimenting with drugs on his parent patients. That's not lab work, right? You take everything apart and you put it back together. That's what the Emerald Tablet says to do, and that's chemistry.
Yeah, well, I think also a lot of this too is because we've become reliant entirely. I was talking about this with my wife Taylor actually, because we're talking about, a lot of people, we were wondering this idea. A lot of people can't engage in sort of mythic thought, can't engage in the perception of serious metaphor and allegory, right? And it's just like, how do you get people to understand and see things through an allegorical lens? Like, and then she's like going on about, well, you need to get people to read because it's reading that allows people to see in that. And then I'm like, but wait a second. No, because if we look at the tradition, all of the myths are born out of sitting in nature. So the real
it's
thing is about perceiving the signs and contemplating the sign. So you have
look,
to contemplate nature, whether it's the book or whether it's the world is irrelevant, but it's the deep act of thinking upon one's relation to the other. That is the whole nature of science. It's the whole nature of self-discovery, whole
yeah,
nature of
So
all of
with
it.
alchemy, if you're working in your lab with the chemicals, that it's the process is gonna be happening at all these levels.
Right.
So you
yeah.
don't have to think about it because you're
Mhm.
doing it and the transformation is taking place. And I
All right.
recommend
So
anyone interested in magic at least do some distillation or something so that you can feel the that this is a everything is a spiritual process. And
yeah,
when we separate it, that's the issue. Then we don't know what's going on.
it's true, but it's also the reverse for magic. And I did a series of articles on alchemy, and we came to three conclusions. One, alchemy was started by women,
Yes.
right, in Egypt.
Yes.
Secondly, that chemistry is alchemy, alchemy is chemistry.
Yeah.
But thirdly, that magic has lost the idea that what magic is a process by which you are doing spiritual work. And if it doesn't work for you, if you don't get real results, throw it out, which is what the
Yes.
alchemists taught us. All right.
Yes.
So, magic should not be a subjective experience, it should be an objective experience.
Yeah.
If you call up
It's
some
gotta
spirit and
work.
he doesn't come, you're
Yeah.
not doing it right.
Listen,
So,
people have been doing plant a seed on the new moon since
mhm,
they didn't have a garden anymore. Because you know what? That's a blind.
mhm,
Go ahead
yeah,
and try to plant a seed on the new moon. It is not going to come up. It says that so that people who aren't initiated
mhm,
won't hurt themselves. That's
mhm,
what that's for. You
yeah,
don't you don't ever plant a seed on a new moon because it's not going to come up.
yeah.
You plant a
And
seed on if you want a root crop on the waning moon and if you want a leaf crop on the waxing moon. Every farmer knows this.
yeah. But the allegory, like the dark moon when you do your planting being the womb of time and things like, but the allegory isn't really even that hidden. I mean, science today still uses allegory. We've all seen those molecule diagrams where they have straws and balls.
It doesn't really look like
Nobody
that.
nobody believes that an atom looks like that,
They do,
right?
though, is the problem. The same way they believe that they can plant a seed on the new
Well,
moon. And
not
even if they
necessarily.
do it and it never comes up, they're
This
still
is
going to keep
this
doing it.
this is where there's always a deep break when you start to get into the most advanced forms of science and then what people perceive as science. Because, like, for example, if you start to get into the extreme forms of math, everyone's going to tell you that this is pure abstraction and that we're
Okay.
playing in an imaginary realm.
The
Before you
guy
can do
who
math, you
invented
have to
that was
imagine
Sir
the
Isaac
universe.
Newton, and he was an
Well, way
alchemist.
before Newton,
Yeah,
way before Newton.
yeah,
Yeah, it all
yeah.
comes
Seven,
out of
Piece of
seven,
alchemy
shit.
for sure. But yeah,
seventy
and he
percent
was an
of
alchemist.
70% of what Newton wrote was alchemy,
Yeah.
Yeah,
70% of all
but
of his writings. But then we have all of our amazing, innovative scientists like Tesla. They were all they understood the allegories of alchemy. They were
Yes.
into alchemy.
Yes.
Yeah. And they were, yeah, and it's not that far the allegory that you use in alchemy is the same as what you use in science. It's not, alchemy still exists today. You know, I don't know why we have this academic separation, because it doesn't happen in real science. Real science and alchemy is still the same thing today. But in academia, some people go, "Oh yeah, no, 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 that's fiction." But when you
Well,
start working in the,
I would
yeah,
push back on this because modern science has created its own framework and its own universal system set of understanding in order to form a specific consensus. And in order to
exactly.
develop, but in order to develop this consensus, it has completely kind of shifted far away from the general alchemy that birthed it. Now, I don't necessarily see this as like a radical separation, but it is one that has led to that science being so far removed from its roots that it becomes hard for many people who are invested within a modern scientific framework to be able to relate. And it's just because of the nature of this system, in order to create such a consensus that is all based around what is perceivable and what is
Mhm.
documentable, you know, and that is a very important framework for which to perceive the world. But even scientists will admit the limitations of said framework. You're working within the realms of what is perceivable and measurable. And the
Yeah,
very act of measure is a violent act that shapes reality. You know,
yeah.
this is why
Ask
something like
Schrodinger's cat. That's right.
right. This is why something like quantum physics becomes such an
Yeah,
impossibility. Well, not an impossibility, but again, we're dealing in the realms of
It
pure
is
speculation.
change and transformation is just something
yeah,
violent about it. And my
yeah.
alchemy teacher, Robert Allen Bartlett, he says that he's a Bechdel chemist, 40 hours a
Mm,
week, the head chemist at Bechdel in Seattle.
Mm.
And only because he gets to use their advanced lab to do his alchemical experiments on the weekends. And but he's the master of both.
Yeah, he probably has to
right.
sign a very big disclaimer saying, "Oh, if I blow it up, I will take responsibility."
No, he doesn't. He was blowing up his shed in his yard when he was 12, so he doesn't blow anything up anymore.
Oh, that's
But
reassuring.
coincidentally, when I went to take the class with him, he handed out the textbook, and it was a book written by my great grandfather
Ah,
on my
circle
stepfather's
closes.
side.
The
And
Orobus eats its tail. There we
I
go.
didn't even know he was an alchemist because that's how much we don't talk about it, you know?
Right. You know, and I think, I mean, a part of this also has to be discussed because we're dealing with, and as you alluded to, right, alchemy has become occulted and it has been destroyed and it
Yeah.
has been removed largely from our tradition. But this is part of the
And
entire
ridiculed and
removal.
denigrated, etc. You know, like
Yeah,
it's considered
yeah,
stupid. Yeah.
this
But there's,
coincides. Let just let me finish my point, please. Right? This coincides,
yeah.
okay, with the complete removal of, so what we see within the Christian tradition is only one aspect of the Western magical tradition, which is the Apollonian path of ascension, right? The right hand path, the masculine path. And we've
Mhm.
seen a complete loss of the snake path, the Chthonian, the feminine path. And the whole essence of the Chthonian path is what? You climb the tree of life and you reintegrate all of the elements, right?
Mhm.
Whereas in the Apollonian, what do? You reject your earthly nature and you
Yeah.
ascend to the stars. Now, I don't think
Yeah.
either of these paths is negative or positive. I think they're just two options. But we exist in a world where now only one option has been allowed and another has been vilified. So our entire world is confused and broken, you know?
Well, with
I
the new
still,
body mind medicine, we're weaving it back together slowly.
Yes. Yeah.
But
It
that's
yeah,
why
hasn't
we
been
need to go
complete.
back to basics.
Right.
but everything you find in a scientific lab, like your iambucus, even a Bain Marie, you can't walk into a restaurant and not have a Bain Marie. And Bain
Yeah.
Marie was named after Maria the Jewess
Do
because
we
she
know
used to,
that? No, we don't know that it's named
yeah,
after
it's,
her. Everyone
guess,
calls it that, right?
Yeah, but it's what she used to bathe her chemicals and keep them at a
Yeah,
particular
she
temperature.
Yeah,
invented
but
it.
we
Whether
can only take this as far as Zosimos of Panopolis, right? So it all comes from him. It's all, again, it's all mythic story, right?
no, we've got pretty
Yeah,
good
no.
documentation, and I
No, we
showed
don't
that in
have
my
any
article.
documentation of her. We don't have
Oh,
any documentation of
oh,
her
I'll
at
have to
all.
put the article up, and people can tell me what they think. But we do have quite a bit of documentation.
No, we
It's
don't
just,
have any of her. We don't have any
We
real
don't know
evidence of
anything
her or
about her life.
anything.
Yeah.
No.
well, we don't,
She
yeah, but we know what she did and what she produced.
well, we
So,
know what Zosimos of Panopolis
Yeah.
preserved,
Yeah.
and
yeah.
we know what that tradition continued to preserve. And we know that she was celebrated cross-culturally, which is a really
Yes.
interesting thing, right?
Mm,
Within Arabic,
mm,
European, and Jewish
mm.
traditions. So she's clearly extraordinarily important, but there's just no written record outside of Zosimos of
Well,
Panopolis.
everything was destroyed, right? There
Exactly. Right.
was
Exactly.
record. He's
Yeah.
he didn't know her personally.
Of
He's drawing
course.
on other books
Of
that don't
course.
exist anymore. So
Exactly. But all I'm saying is that at this point, we're dealing with the myth, right? Now,
Mhm.
the how much she's attested within the history, she's certainly an important character who existed in some form. There's no doubt in my
Mhm.
mind.
everyone
But
agrees
Mhm.
she existed.
right,
Mm.
exactly. But
Yeah,
what can we
there's
say about
more
her
evidence for
outside
her
of
than Jesus. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
absolutely. Right? Yeah, but that's not saying much.
Well, and so she's the one
Yeah.
that everybody starts with, and we have to start with her
So
because
yeah, we might as well
she
bring her
invented the
to
double
begin with.
boiler, you know?
Yeah.
Right.
And that's a woodcut by an artist that I really like. And she's on Etsy. Moose. Anyway, you can find her on Etsy.
But
I'll write it down.
before we dive deep into Maria the Jewish, I do want to point out, so there are, okay, first of all, when we're talking about something like alchemy, as you pointed out clearly, we're talking about something that's primordial, ancient, and human, that's way before any written record,
Yeah,
way
it comes
before
from
any,
Africa. Like
of course it
everything
does.
human,
Of course,
it
like
comes
everything
from
human.
Africa. And there's no
But
argument about that.
no, 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 no. But when we're going into the tradition, right, they trace it to that Median magical line. And that Median magical
Well, let
line
me clear
in the
that up for you
Magi.
because this is a traceable thing that occurred.
Yeah.
They
I
started
know.
burning the libraries in Egypt in 40s, I think 45, 46 BC to Julius Caesar by accident, right? And they didn't finish burning the libraries until about 300, right? AD. So
Mhm.
40, 50 to 3, they're burning the libraries. That's what they're doing. So if you're an alchemist living in Alexandria, which was the major hub of it, it means you have to pack your shit and go, right? It means you're gonna take the only the essential scrolls. They're going in your backpack. You got your alembic and your boots, and you're going
Mhm.
where? You're going to the Caliph states. You're
Mhm.
gonna take refuge in the Caliph states.
Mhm.
Some rich guy is gonna be like, "Yes, we want the knowledge. So glad you had to flee. Please stay." Yeah,
Mhm.
and so
Mhm.
that's okay. Kami, it just means Egypt.
Yeah.
Alexander
Black
went to
Earth. Yeah.
Egypt. He fell in love with Egypt. They're fantastic people. They got this metallurgy and stained glass and all this stuff that they couldn't even imagine, right? And it was
Yeah,
called black. He just called it black. The banks of the river were black, this rich black earth. The people were black. It's just called black. Kemi. That was it. By the time you get to the Caliph states and you're running away from the burning library, that's where it becomes alchemy.
Mm.
So
But there,
then but we're getting ahead of the thing. So
yeah, there is I mean, the legend of how it started, the legend from Egypt, how it started was that, like so many alchemists are called Isis because alchemistry was Isis's art. People think she was the goddess of magic, but it was more alchemy. It was more science. And when her husband died and she was looking for the parts and she couldn't find the parts, she was given inspiration to go to the court of Ishtar in Babylon, right? And there she worked as the producer of Ishtar's makeup. She used to make the black for her eyes, antimony for her, all of
Which
these
was
things.
antimony, yeah.
Yeah. And she would, and she worked there for 7 years because she was such a good makeup artist,
Mhm.
until Ishtar finally says, well, the part that you're looking for, we have. We've got it here. Right. And then she gave her the final part of her husband that had been ripped apart, and she went home and then used alchemy to bring him back to life. But yeah, she did
Horus,
she took
Osiris
the
the Horus.
art, yeah. So she took the art to Babylon. So it did go east, right?
Yeah,
And it was finalized in the east before it came
yeah,
back. That was the
Yeah,
legend. That
this
was the
is this
myth.
these
is what I
places
wanted to
are
get
really not
into.
not very
So
Yeah.
distant. We're not talking
Mm,
about one continent to the next. You can walk from
yeah. But
Cairo to Babylon.
this is what I was trying to get to, though, with the Median tradition and this whole idea of the Magi, because that is the essence of what the Magi represents. Because the Magi represents, you have the Eastern tradition because she represents that far Eastern magic from the
mhm,
Greek pantheon, but also the synthesis of the Ammon tradition that comes from, this predates even Egypt. This comes from Siwa, right? That comes to us
mhm,
from this great goddess Neith, right? Which
mhm,
is, as we talk with Dr. Carla, we're talking the earliest version of the mother. And this is that primordial darkness that comes out of the
mhm,
floodwaters and gives birth to the sun. So this is
mhm,
as old as dirt. But
It
what's
is.
so wild about it is it's that old as dirt magic that then meets the new Eastern magic and is
mm,
synthesized in the
Yes.
Magi. And
Yes.
then the
mm,
Magi represent this
mm,
preservation of that Egyptian magic that survives. And
Well,
as
then
you pointed out, it
alchemy
bounces
comes to
around.
the west
Yeah,
from the east because it's
yeah.
already been destroyed in North Africa.
Yeah,
mhm,
well,
So
it
it's moving
survives. It survives
around.
a bit. It survives a bit in Alexandria in the occulted underground. But you're right.
Yeah.
It winds up mostly coming to us from the Jewish, and then from the Arabian tradition. We get the
Yeah,
Picapists.
because the Christians killed everyone and burned everything.
Right,
So so for when the Greek universities were closed, there wasn't a woman in a university for 1,000 years, right? We're gonna go
right.
through the alchemists. After they dismember Hypatia,
Yeah, they were so
there's
scared.
no book published by a woman on chemistry until 1600.
Mm,
That's not because there weren't any female alchemists. It's because they were stringing them up.
Yeah, they were
I would
hiding.
argue. I would argue if go back and I know you should read Christine de Pizan. Even though she's operating from a pseudo Christian, she's an alchemist, full through and through. She becomes a man. She recreates herself as the
But was she
androgyne.
a lab alchemist?
She's doing alchemy in the sense of the metaphors. She's telling
Okay,
you
that's not
clearly,
alchemy.
but
That's
that's part and
Jungian.
partial
It's
of,
not.
yeah, yeah. It's the same tradition. You can't.
No.
You have the
If you're
divine
not
Rebbe.
doing alchemy in the lab, you are not doing alchemy.
I would
This is
argue.
chemistry.
I would argue that, okay, I there's clearly with someone like her, they're doing that kind of aspect because her father was a court alchemist, he was a court astrologer, so I would think she was doing it. But I mean, that allegory of the myth is so essential to everything, and we're dealing with chaos fractals, and it's about healing and reforming the divine androgyne. That's the essential Bacchus and adoration of Venus. I don't know how
Mm,
you can separate that from anything. That's the entirety of both paths, whether you're
mm,
Okay.
doing the
That is
snake
one
path
step
or
in the
the,
alchemical process, and we'll get there.
that's the whole process. That's love
No,
in and of itself.
it's one step in the alchemical
No,
process.
that's
That
the whole
divine androgyne is
process.
one step, and I'm going to show it to you on the map.
That's the whole step.
No,
mhm,
The Rebbe,
there are
mhm,
8 steps. The Rebbe is one of those
but
yeah.
steps.
the completion of the total self is the whole of the path. To know thyself is the whole of the path, is what I'm getting at. I'm talking
Well,
about
they're making medicine.
it's not just medicine, though. We're talking about
Yes.
the nature of reality. It's not just medicine. It's not,
You
it's
cannot
both.
separate these things. And if
I'm
you're
not
not doing your
separating.
lab work, you're not an alchemist. That's that. if you only get that from everything I have to say, then it's good enough for me.
Mhm. Yeah, it is encompassing, because we forget there's tribes called the Mascara tribe. That's where we get the word for our mascara from. And they were using a process to
That's
make,
cool.
yeah, they were using an alchemical process to literally make this
Yeah,
dark ring around their eyes. And the
yeah,
dark ring around the eye was a symbol of the alchemist. So we often think of
right.
Arabic and Persian nations drawing this dark ring around their eyes.
Yeah, but we don't know how to
Whether
make it
them,
anymore. So there's an issue with
yeah,
coal now in the Middle East where people stick antimony in there
I
without
know.
going through the process, and it makes you sick.
Oh, very. I mean, kills you. Yeah, but
Yeah,
but male or female, if you were male or female, your symbol of being an alchemist was wearing makeup.
some
So you
places.
had to wear the mascara, right? And that showed that you were the producer of not only medicine but cosmetics, and you knew how to make this stuff. So
Interesting.
that's where we
Mm,
get our word mascara from.
that's such a
But
trip.
it was originally worn majority by the alchemists, male or
But
female.
see, that's the problem. If you think it's just a metaphor, you're just gonna stick the antimony in there, stick it on your eye, and you're gonna die.
Yeah, well, yeah.
You
Today we still
have to
get.
take it through the chemical process, or you're gonna kill
Mhm,
yourself.
mhm. Yeah. Okay. I've got a great book over here called Hypatia's Heritage. I was just looking for it. And it goes
Love
through
it.
the heritage from Hypatia that continues through with all of the female scientists, not just the alchemists. All right. So anybody that created something, you got to understand that when the original female alchemists, I mean, cooking in the kitchen didn't look like what it looks like today. Our kitchen in our houses looks much more like a lab than what an old kitchen did.
Yeah.
Yeah, because cooking itself became this alchemical process. I'm going to combine this with this and make this, and it's nourishing for my family.
Yeah. And if you
Right?
can't eat it, if it's just an idea, it's not cooking.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, and I think people lose that with magic as well. It's got to be
Right.
practical. It's got to
It's
work.
gotta
It's got to
work.
work.
Yeah.
Hmm. Mm.
We need to those start to have some kind of explanation of what this alchemical path is a bit, because people in the chat are getting confused now. And
Well, let's start with the history of the alchemists.
right,
And we've got Maria the Jewess, and give me the next one.
okay,
Maria the Jewess invented the double boiler. Cleopatra the alchemist invented the alembic. The alembic is that round thing that goes like this. It's got a nose. And so you're boiling and it boils over and then it drips into your next recipient. That's a chemical thing. And you're right. The next one is Zosimos.
so
So
continue.
give me the next one because we don't really know much. Here's
Right,
Zosimos. He wrote the book that we still have that
right.
tells of these women who started. They invented the equipment to do the process.
Yeah, we also have to say that he's the essential authority, but we also have them referenced like in the Arabic and Jewish traditions. So
Yes,
there's
yes.
more than just him, but he is the only real source that dives other than just the references, you know?
I don't know anything about Taoist alchemy,
Right.
so I can't weave that in. But that is also it's contemporaneous tradition.
Yeah,
And
I know.
Zosimos. Now, I do have to a little disclaimer. If you are Nazi adjacent, Nazi sympathizing, you don't want to do this because it's gonna turn you queer. I just, full disclosure. That happened what Hitler tried to do a bunch, and every time he got someone doing lab work, they would turn queer and they would let all the prisoners go. So these are two paths that diverge in a wood and they never reconnect. In fact, that the Nazis had to quit doing alchemy because it brings on an awakening process to the mind and the heart, and you can't be like that anymore.
Mhm.
Well,
So
you're gonna
if
have to
that's your
balance your
trip,
poles.
then don't do this. There are plenty of other fascist magics that you can do, but this is not for you.
Well, we see this right in the traditions with all of the great sages. In order to become a fully fledged sage, you have to balance your pole. Medea must become the emperor. Tiresias had to become a woman. It's just how it goes in order
So of
to be
all
your
the
full
alchemists
self.
I'm gonna list, only two of them were married.
Mm.
They weren't.
Oh, wow.
Most of them are asexual, bisexual, transsexual. It's for queers. It's not for fascists. It's just not. So
Well, you're
Zosimus of
incorporating the
Panopolis.
whole world, right? You're
Zosimus
incorporating the
of
whole world.
Panopolis lived from 350 to 420 AD. He was living in Rome and Egypt, and he was writing in Greek. And he's the first one that we really have all his writings. He was working with a soror mystica who was not his wife. So it's a female student or friend, and that's traditional.
Yeah.
Mm.
Uh, it's
We see
it's
this
tra-
even to the modern times. You have this idea, the muse, the scarlet woman, right? Those that feminine energy has to be present to balance that
yes,
masculine,
it
right?
has to
Yeah.
be.
Yeah,
And
it's
we even know her
Pythagorean.
name, but I can't really pronounce it correctly. It's
Yeah. Yeah, but Pythagorean concept was the Sora Mystica. Comes out of Pythagorean schools. The magical sister, the magical sister.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Theosebia. Theosebia was his soror mystica.
yeah.
And they function as a couple, but it's not a romantic couple, and they're not married.
Hmm.
Or
Yeah,
the alchemical
So
Pythagoras made all of the first 10 digits. The odds were male, the evens were female. 5 was the number of marriage because it was the uniting of the first masculine and feminine numbers. Apart from 0, which was 1, which was a unique case, except for the 7. 7 was the Sora Mystica. 7 was the magical sister, even though it was an odd number. Yeah, and prime.
twisted sister.
Mm,
So
mm,
the next one we have is Hypatia, I think. There she is. So Hypatia of Alexandria, she's roughly the same time as him.
mhm.
She's a philosopher, mathematician. She practiced distillation, scientific experimentation. And although she was tolerant of Christians and had many Christian students, she was murdered and dismembered by a Christian mob. And that is the last female alchemist we have until the 1600s.
Yeah. She was also a priestess at the Museion in
Yeah.
Alexandria. So this puts her as the center of the world of science at this time and the center of Greek theology at this time, right? So we're talking as powerful as you get in terms of academia.
And it's
Yeah,
important to realize that being clergy is a big is often off a lot of these alchemists are clergy.
Right.
yeah, yeah.
Wow. But that's so depressing and wild to hear, right? We don't get another, at least out and out alchemist for 1,000 years. I'm going to send you some Christine de Pizan books because I'm
Yes,
certain she was doing the actual work. She can't tell you what she's
she
doing
probably was.
because of the time in which she's writing. She was the
When was
first.
she writing?
She's writing in it's the 1400s, early Renaissance. Let me just
Yeah,
find the
it was
exact
that
time.
was that was too early. Yeah.
She's the first published woman author in Europe in the vernacular, like period. And it's only because she was sponsored by the Queen of France, Queen Isabeau at the time.
Yeah.
So she was writing in 1380,
Yeah.
1380.
Yeah, too
So yeah,
early.
too early.
She couldn't have told us that she was doing lab alchemy. They would have burned her alive.
But she does tell us that she became a man in every sense of the word,
Which
you
is
know,
part of it,
so,
yeah.
which is part
Which,
of it.
as I've been saying,
And she says she creates the philosopher's stone. She gains the 9. She says she gains the 9 stones of the muses and pulls them from the well. There's all of this alchemical
Mm,
allegory,
Imagery.
mm,
Yeah, yeah,
she's doing
So it's
something.
like,
She's doing
was she
something.
doing it? I don't know. She's using the language,
She's doing
right?
something,
yeah,
yeah.
Right. So
yeah,
anyway,
And
but
again,
yeah.
it turned her queer. So full
yeah,
disclosure.
it turned it. Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, yeah. Anyway, let's
The
continue
next
here.
one This is
Gerber.
Geber, and as you can see, he's a black man.
Mm-hmm.
He's working in Iran and Iraq. He wrote in Arabic. He was a foundational Shiite Muslim known for systemizing quantitative analysis in laboratory experiments. He is the father of modern chemistry.
Yeah, Jabir ibn Hayyan,
Yeah.
right?
He
Really,
died
really
under house
important.
arrest. You
Oh,
know,
wow.
yeah.
Wow.
He was on house arrest for a long time.
That's I mean, that's the kind of the history of the Shi'i. And
Yeah.
you want to hear, you guys want to see the most brutal history of all time?
Oh,
Go
God.
read about the history of the Shi'i, and
Mm,
then wonder if what's going on right now is going to stop these people, because
mm,
it's not going to stop them for one moment. But anyway,
mm.
yeah. This guy's a wild character, part of the Islamic Golden Age. So this
Yeah.
is when the Islamic world was at the height of science and discovery, and we were under the oppression of the theocratic church, right?
Yeah. That's Kabir Ibn Hayyan. And yeah, it was going on over there, and it wasn't really going on in the what Eastern Asia, Western Europe until the next one. You got Albertus Magnus,
Mm-hmm.
and he's a clergyman, and this is 1100s, 1200s. A German Dominican friar, Aristotelian scholar, who contributed the understanding of minerals and chemical compounds, and his collected works are 38 volumes
Now,
Mm.
on
this was something I
everything:
wanted to,
theology, philosophy, and chemistry.
this was something I was really interested to talk to you about, because the Catholic Church and the Protestant Church has kind of a very mixed reception of alchemy across the traditions. You know, we have some people who incorporate alchemy who get killed, like
Yeah.
Giordano Bruno.
Yeah.
We get other people who incorporate alchemy, like him, and of course, I'm trying to think of her name, the woman who wrote the language of the birds. You talk about her, Shay. Oh my gosh, she's a
Ah,
monk. It's gonna bug me. Um,
The musician.
what's her name? Hildegard
Yes,
von
oh,
Bingen,
Bingen.
him. Yeah.
right? So
Hildegard. Yeah.
you get some of these you get all of these inspired people within the Catholic Church who are using it, but it's like there's this fine line. If you use it in the wrong way, if you're too explicit, they'll snuff you out. You
Yeah.
But
know?
this is a really good example of like I maintain that the allegory that they used for alchemy is still what they use in science today. They just call it different things. Like the child will always, change the names of things and say the parent was uncool. But
Mm,
in the Middle Ages, it became essential to give alchemy a Christian overlay, right? And they certainly did. The woman,
They had to.
in the stars. They put it in the language of Revelation, which was incredibly mystical. And they gave all of these allegories that were used in alchemy. They went, oh well, we're studying the scriptures because it's got a Christian overlay for it here.
Well, and
But
each of these guys, they had a protector, and
mhm,
then they didn't, and then they did again, and when they didn't, their books got burned.
mhm.
So
yeah,
you had to hook up with
that's a good
other
point.
clergy people who were thinking like you and weren't gonna
You needed
send you
bishop
off.
support, or you needed prince or king support, or
Yeah.
otherwise you were getting you
Yeah.
got lost, and that's generally been
Which
the
is
thing.
why the
Mm.
pitch was always about the gold,
Yeah.
because that's how you're going to get a nobleman or a bishop to
And
sponsor you.
it's always, it's like, who's the pope at the time, and do you grovel significantly enough? Because
Yeah,
I look at, like, for example, you can
yeah,
read, like, for
totally.
example, there's a character, Meister Eckhart, who is sort of a Christian mystic. He pushes the bounds of orthodoxy, you know. But when I read him, he sounds to me as like an outsider, very
Mhm,
much like Francis of Assisi. But they're only
mhm.
separated by a few hundred years in like one or two popes. But it's
Mhm.
just,
Yeah.
it's because Francis was the right place at the right time with the right support, that he was able to be the radical poverty mystic.
Yeah,
And then at another
Mhm.
point, someone tries to do something similar and they're kicked out of the church,
yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
Oh,
Or they're
yeah.
killed, right? And it's like,
Well,
from
it
the
just
outside,
speaks
I'm like,
to
how
there's
is this?
all
How is
kinds of
this?
people. Everywhere you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
If you're in line at the post office, there's going to be good people, bad people, smart people, stupid
Yeah.
people. And
Mm.
it's the line between good and evil runs through every human heart. And it's
Mm.
not on the ground anywhere. And it's not,
But it's
in a
also
religious
important to talk
context.
about how this alchemy becomes the main pillar, I would say one of the central pillars of the magical tradition within
Oh,
the
yeah.
occulted secret societies.
Yeah.
So what most people now associate with modern magic, right? Because if we read someone like Alpheus Levi, he's very much both an alchemist, a Catholic, and a Martinist. And so
Yeah.
he's walking these three worlds, right? Of this
Mm.
Freemasonry, of this Orthodox Catholicism, and of this radical transformative magic, you
Yeah.
know?
Mm.
And this is not just him. You see this throughout these Rosicrucian societies. We see this in the early Golden Dawn, even. They're a Christian magical order, right?
Yeah.
They have monarchist tendencies, like this was this
These
was
guys are
part
already
of a whole
twisted.
big thing.
These
They're
people were
twisted, yeah.
taking refuge in the church
Yeah.
because otherwise they couldn't afford a lab and they were probably going to get killed.
Yeah.
Oh, but the
Yeah.
other thing was protection was results based, and we see this with
Yes.
alchemists
Mm,
through the
Yes.
ages. I
Yes.
mean, today we know that if you take quartz ground, and you crush it up, right, and you run cyanide and mercury through it, you're going to extract the gold in
Mm,
significant
mm,
amounts out of
mm.
out of quartz.
Yeah.
And when you look at that in very practical, pragmatic Western terms today, you realize that a lot of these guys were doing that. They were taking the primer materia, quartz based earth, running it with mercury and sulfur that produced eventually a cyanide type material. And it's still what the mines use today to get their slags, right, to get the
Yeah.
seconds out of the mine. And with the price of gold today, it makes what was once an expensive process, it now makes it economical. But these kings that were looking, in these churches that were looking for extra fund, you mean you can take this stony ground out here with a bit of quartz in it, and you're going to turn that into gold for the church?
I met a guy
And
who can
these,
make it out of seawater.
yes, you can extract it from seawater as well.
Yeah.
But this
Yeah.
is chemistry. This is
Yes.
real
well,
world mining chemistry from
Yes.
today,
one of the
right? And
one
these
of the
guys
things.
knew it. And the
Oh
money
yeah.
was power. The money was
Yeah.
power.
Mm.
And so if you didn't have that one's backing, of course they wanted to get rid of you because you're going to take away their finances
You got to
if you get
Well,
rid of
produce. Yeah.
this. Yeah,
it's
and
the
if
same
and if they
thing.
get rid of you, you eliminate your opposition.
It's the same thing like
So
we see when you look at the grimoire tradition. Like people always wonder, why did this stuff survive? Why did the church allow it? And what you say is extraordinarily real because a lot of that grimoire magic, what is it actually being used for and who's promoting it? It's kings. And a lot of it was used as disease The vast majority of a lot of that grimoire stuff is warfare. It's about going out and killing your neighbor. It's about how do you spread disease. And that's
exactly.
why allowed to survive, even though it was black and considered anti-Christian, it represented power. And so
Mm,
it always had a place for those who
yeah,
wanted to wield power.
call up the spirit of disease and send it to somebody. That's what every witch doctor does. Yeah.
Yep.
And then you need an alchemist to heal you.
And if you're reading these grimoires, the Muslims and the Christians are doing this to each other across the Middle Ages. That's what a lot of this magic is, right?
Mhm,
Like cures and diseases. And
mhm.
I'm almost certain that the Black Plague was alchemy. Was an alchemical plot, you know?
Well, all you have to do is kill all the cats and have a rat infestation. I think
Yeah.
it was stupidity, not
I think it
science, that
was
created the plague.
compounded, of course, compounded by stupidity. You could never have the level of
Just
tragedy that
the
happened.
cats were the witchy things, and so they burned them on it with the witches,
Yep.
and then you
And a
have
lot
no
of
more
this was
cats, and you have no more snakes, and now you have a lot of rats.
what's so funny too is the cat thing is almost certainly anti-Muslim propaganda. One of my when I remember one of the early companions of the Prophet Muhammad is called Abu Huraira, the father of cats, and he
Uh-uh.
started in Mecca, one of the earliest documented animal shelters. and he would take care of all the cats in the city. And the
Well, it's an
Muslims,
Egyptian thing. Again, it's an
yeah, yeah.
Egyptian thing. And
And then
Egypt, it
everywhere the
was
Muslims would go, they
illegal
keep
to
this.
export
Yeah,
cats from Egypt, and therefore European witches used polecats and weasels
yeah.
until
Yeah.
it became legal to have cats.
Right,
Yeah.
but this is
And
why
the
in Europe they're killing the cats because they're like everything Muslim is bad, and then it comes
yeah.
back and bites them in.
Well, and
Yeah.
and and
And the tabbies have an
contemporaneously
M.
with the witches, yeah.
Right,
Yeah, the
right.
tabby
Everything
has an M on its forehead, which is supposed to be where Muhammad patted it and left his initial. So
right.
every tabby has an
It's so
M
cute.
for
Oh,
Muslim or Muhammad. So yeah. So
let's
the
go to
Right.
the
tabbies.
next one.
Yeah, that's so cute.
Mm,
Roger Bacon, 1214 to 1294. Medieval
mhm.
English polymath and Aristotelian philosopher again, who studied at Oxford. He was a Franciscan friar who emphasized empirical experimentation in alchemy. These are scientists. And then the next one is the most famous one. Paracelsus, 1493 to 1541, largely considered the father of modern medicine. Now, Paracelsus was probably a trans man if he wasn't born intersex. We know this from his skeleton, and it was also surmised because nobody had access. See, we were already so divided by gender that you had folk magic over here and you had science over here already in the 1200s. We're starting to divide real bad, and so somehow Paracelsus had access. He dressed as a woman and went and spoke with the folk healers, and then he was in the University of Basel as a man. But his skeleton reveals that there's something there,
Yeah, there's such
and
a wild figure,
it's
right?
also where we get the word bombastic. That was his middle name.
Well, okay, his name literally means beyond Celsus, which was at the time his favorite philosopher, right? I'm trying to remember. I'm pretty sure Celsus is this Roman Cornelius Celsus. I'm not too familiar with the work, but I remember reading that that's where his name comes from. And then
He
the other
he
thing
also
he does,
practiced tantrum yoga. If he didn't like a book, he would do this performance art piece of burning it in the town square and screaming about how bad it was.
the he's also the guy who gives us the word gnome. So prior to him, these we have all kinds of different names for this, but in the German prior to him they were called kobolds, and sometimes you'll still see that word.
Huh.
But he used that word gnome to equate them with spirits of the mind, right? And he was connecting them with this idea of the Larrys, and yeah, really interesting character. I was
Sort
doing the
of how
deep
we use
dive.
the word troll nowadays.
Well, yeah, yeah. Troll is another spirit similar, right? But I was doing the deep dive a little while back into Larry's and gnomes and brownies, and he came up as the source for that word gnome, and it literally has to do it. He derived it from the Greek, and he claimed. Now I'm not sure how good his Greek is, but he claimed that the word gnome meant spirit of the mind, and he related to the gnomon, which is a type of a sundial. A really wild character though, interesting guy,
Fascinating
or
guy.
trans man. Like, tell me something new. That's wild to hear.
1493 to 1541. So we're already getting there. Now, Nicholas Flamel was the next one.
Mhm. I
And
remember explaining to my son when he was reading Harry Potter that Nicholas Flamel was actually a character from
an
history.
actual guy, it's a real guy. He was the
Philosopher's Stone is a
bookseller.
serious thing, right?
Yeah,
He was the bookseller.
yeah.
And
Beautiful.
he was married. Paranel, but they never had children. Paranel was twice widowed, and then they married. She was his soror mystica.
Mhm.
So they easily could have both been queer. They never had children. Uh, and he only became famous as an alchemist after he died. He designed his own tombstone, which is in the Cluny Museum. Which and then they didn't find anything in there. They were really good with their money. She was twice widowed, and so she had capital, and he had a bookstore, and they had community centers and hospitals. They were really good with their money. They had real estate investments, and they just kept getting better. And then they kind of disappear. I mean, it said they died, but then there's nobody in the tomb, and some people say they saw him later in India. Who knows?
Who knows? His body's
But
Yeah,
you can
this.
go to
missing.
his house. It's the oldest stone house in Paris. It's a restaurant now, and you can go see it.
Oh, that's
Yeah, I
cool.
used to be the head of the Immortalist Association, which was talking about life extension and all those sorts of things. And he is definitely considered one of the immortals. So,
Yes.
Right.
yeah, he
Yes.
disappeared, and
He's
it,
hanging out
it
with the
is,
Green Man in Saint Germain somewhere.
This is a
yeah, yeah.
spirit that
It's
you can
supposed to,
summon and talk to personally.
yeah. So it is like alchemy is also about life extension. People forget that as well. If you're doing this right, you're bringing the elements together that are necessary to extend
Oh
your
yeah.
life.
All these guys got way too old for their time. Yeah.
Mm,
Right, right. Well, you see this in both Eastern and Western traditions because, like, Lao Tzu was said to be an immortal who would just
mm,
wander and show up when he was needed, you know?
And Medea had the
Medea is an
longevity
immortal
magic.
as
Yeah.
well, right? And
mm,
Yeah.
she's said to return when she's needed. And you get two versions with her, right? In one version, she becomes the Virgo, Estrella, in a sense, to the stars.
Yeah.
And
mm,
Virgil tells us she'll return with the coming golden age. And then we got another version where she's in the underground, hidden in Crimea. And again, she'll return with the golden age. So,
mm.
but yeah, interesting
But they
stuff,
all
right?
had this where, like, as a person, they
Yeah,
they they looked weirdly younger.
Mm,
yeah.
Even if
yeah.
they had white hair, they had, you know, clear skin or something. There was something odd about it. So they're
Mm,
clearly making medicine and taking it.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Raven's Wings got a really interesting comment there. It says,
Mm,
at this point, the Swiss were bankrolling the whole operation. It's around the time that Rosslyn Chapel went up, and they were making mysticism we enjoy now. Yes, but it was also about them making money.
Yeah.
So these
Yeah.
Swiss bankers also the Templars were very much about money,
They
and
were.
and they would bankroll anything that did increase their finances. And the Templars did protect a lot of alchemists. So
right,
we have
right.
records of
And
that.
Mhm.
there was
That's
always
right.
this thing too. There's this weird thing that happens with the Swiss, with the Jewish people, and with this creation of the other, right? In order to create that banking system, you have to subvert the entire Catholic, ideology, because
Yeah.
usury is a sin, but within Judaism, usury is okay as long as you're doing it to people outside the faith, right?
Hmm.
But there's
Hmm.
this, this also connects though,
But there's
because there's
also
this
that,
weird.
that
Yeah.
the most recent Holocaust is just the most recent. There were
Oh, of
Holocausts
course.
every
Yeah.
other year. And if you're
Yeah.
Jewish, you had to have your own money,
Yeah.
period. Because they're not going to let
Yeah.
you use the bank that they
Hmm.
Right.
have. They're not going to let you in. And so you have to have your own money.
But
You
this
have to
kind
have
of
mad
weird
money to get out of town when they start burning you.
But this
Hmm.
kind of weird outsider class thing has been associated with the banks since the Roman Empire, because even in the Roman Empire, they were associated with the cult of Saturn, and the money holders were all seen as separate. They were all considered outsiders. To become one of the tax collectors, you were no longer of the people. There's all this weird, dark magic associated with this stuff.
Yeah,
you
they
know?
Oh,
wanted everybody
uh,
dependent
tell.
on them and not
Yeah,
free and not able to do what they want.
yeah.
Well, like if you run a magical order, you should inherit a charter from a long time ago. If you're going to run a banking system to this day, you
Mm,
have to have an indentured charter. You have to
Yeah.
be a
right,
chartered organization. And then
right.
you have to comply with all the government regulations, which mean they can control you and you're not going up against the government. But yeah, no, but chartered banks were chartered. In other words, they were secret organizations. They had a charter, they had
Yeah.
a system that they ran just like a magical order.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I just wanted to highlight this comment because it needs to be said as well, right?
Yes.
The Jewish people weren't allowed to work other jobs, so they became
That's right.
it's not like it's this self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like the
And it's the
Catholics kind
same
of created
reason
them
that
and
Jewish people
exploited them.
dominate publishing and movies and
Yeah.
radio is because they were excluded from all other professions right up until the 1950s.
And this is not
Yeah.
something that we only see in Europe. We see this similarly happen within India. Like, for example, we have the Jain religion, and the people of that particular religion make up their own subcaste within much of India. And if you look in modern, a lot of the Jains, because of the extreme restrictions of the religion and then the extreme restrictions of caste society, many of them became doctors, bankers, and entertainers. And now in modern society, they're the ultra elite and they represent this small percentage of the population. But it's not some conspiracy, it's just, you know, how things
Yeah.
roll.
Yeah. We forced them into it.
Right?
And
Right,
now you're
right.
mad they're doing that, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. It's wild stuff. It's wild stuff.
No.
But yeah, let's keep going
Yeah.
here.
So the next one is Basil Val. Oh, that's his house. That's
Okay.
Pernell and Nicholas's home. That is a restaurant now that you can go see.
Oh, that's so
Mm.
cool. That would be neat
Yeah,
to eat there, right?
very cool. It's run by a flaming queer guy who is hilarious.
Oh, have you
Yeah.
been?
Go there, talk to him. He's hilarious.
Oh
So did
man.
you say that Flamel's wife's name was Paranella?
Yeah,
Okay, that's a very famous place here in Australia, up in Queensland,
um,
Paranella. I didn't real. They said it was named after a famous woman, but it's a
yeah,
beautiful, beautiful rainforest retreat where magical things happen. Where
yeah,
they've built these amazing buildings that really can't exist, and so they called it Paranella. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Oh, that's
yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
Now, Basil Valentine, we don't know if that was one guy or a bunch of people using one name
Hmm.
because we're still in the 15th, 16th century. And
Hmm.
he's
Right.
a Franciscan friar. So this was, it was either one monk or an abbey.
Hmm.
Right.
And he perfected the work on antimony.
Yeah. Didn't he write the 12 keys?
Yeah.
Right. That's what I've heard, but it's one of these things that it could be a pseudo publication,
Yeah.
right?
All of his work could be, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It
It's such a
still
wild,
wasn't safe. It still wasn't
right.
safe. And you'll see with the next one, Anna Maria Zeglerin, 1550 to 1575. She was a German alchemist. She didn't want to get married, so she was raped.
Oh
And
no.
then she still didn't want to get married, so they made her get married anyway. And she kept practicing chemistry in her house, and then they caught her. She was found guilty of attempted poisoning and intent to burglarize and burned alive.
Go
Oh,
girlfriend.
man.
1575.
Hopefully that was what she was
Now,
doing to her enemies.
how much of that do you think was satire? Are they out to get her? Like, what's going on with this
They,
story?
they, they, she was a brilliant chemist and they killed
Right.
her. That's what
Yeah. So
happened.
they're out to get her. Yeah.
They were out to get her from the beginning when she didn't want to get married.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's such
She
a
drowned her baby in the river.
man. The history of women is just always so shocking.
It's
It
fucked
never
up.
stops. Never
Yeah.
stops.
But
But
then
they
just a few years later, Isabella Cortese, next one, she publishes a book. Now it's just about cosmetics and
Mm,
desserts.
mhm.
Just
Okay.
about cosmetics and desserts,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
There's nothing
So this
occult
is
here.
not an alchemy book. This secret folk remedies for medicines, cosmetics, and transmutation.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So she was able
Aphrodite
to publish
magic.
that because she was married. She was married somebody who covered her ass and took care of her.
Mhm.
The
Wow.
next one though, 1610 to 1680, Marie Merdurac, French autodidact, proto-feminist and lab chemist who wrote Chimie charitable et facile en faveur des dames in 1666. This is the book gets published on Alchemy. We have Hypatia, and then we have her, and we got nothing in between. She
Mm,
refused to marry. She was a powerhouse. She never stopped
mhm,
working for a second. They didn't have time to kill her because she was working, work, 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 work. And she wrote this simple guide to chemistry for women.
Oh,
mm,
that's
Yeah,
beautiful.
awesome.
mm.
And then you get Sir Isaac Newton, who is born in the middle of her life, 1643 to 1727. He
Oh, is
got
this her
old.
book? Sorry. There was a
Sir,
picture in between,
oh
I
yeah,
think.
that's her book. Yeah.
Okay, La Camille Charitable et Facile. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so this is Isaac Newton. All right, sorry.
And then
Now
this
I'm back on
guy,
track.
another complete loner, asexual, and never got married. Totally interested only in alchemy.
Yeah,
English
in fact,
polymath and alchemist, mathematician and astronomer. He built the first reflexive telescope and pretty much invented calculus.
right.
He got a hold of Hypatia's unfinished work. There was
Right.
a page that was torn, and this was the first person who could complete her equations.
His story is kind of wild. He's almost certainly some kind of neurodivergent, as you
Oh yeah,
highlighted there.
Yeah.
all
Famously,
these people were.
his most important work of mathematics, he never intended to publish, but he had shown a friend, and the friend was so amazed that he lied to him and published it behind his back. And it's a
Mhm.
miracle he did, because he wouldn't have got the credit for calculus had he not, because another person wound up discovering calculus like a few months later. So had his buddy not
This was
divulged
stimming.
it,
This
another
guy
person would have
is
got the
sitting
credit.
there filling notebooks with algorithms and logarithms to just deal with his anxiety. That's what he was
Right.
doing. He
Mm,
wasn't trying to write a book. Yeah.
No. And they say, yeah, they say like 90% of his work remains unpublished, and the vast majority of it is alchemical in nature.
mm,
Yeah. And he
mm.
was apparently just a horrible person to be around
Yeah.
for 90% of
Yeah.
the time.
Yeah. I remember reading all the accounts. Yeah, because he looks like quite a handsome man. And you think, oh, yeah, in history, I'd like to meet him. And then you read the accounts of people that met him, and it's like, nah, you don't want to meet this guy.
Well, no, and he was super focused, and he brought us out of the dark ages.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Right. Well, he
apple
advanced
fell on his head.
right.
No woman, no snake, no sin.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
that was an allegory itself, the apple
Yes,
falling on his head. It didn't
yes.
actually happen. A lot of people think it
No.
actually happened,
He
but
there
it was
he's rewriting the myth. He's rewriting
yeah,
the myth to bring us out of the dark ages. And
yeah.
and and
Right.
uh and he was elected to parliament, I believe, after that.
Right. And I just love him too, because he was also a classicist. Like, one of his famous
Mm,
things, standing on the shoulders of giants, right? He's standing on the shoulders of Atlas. He's imagining
mm.
himself as that little dwarf guy. What's that guy's name who hooks up with? I can't think of it now. Someone in the chat help me. Who is the dwarf guy who hangs out with Atlas on his shoulder? Um, all of these Hellenistic nerds, someone will know. But clearly Isaac was a bigger nerd than I am when it comes to this stuff. But yeah,
he
Mm,
he is the biggest nerd
the
of them
biggest
all.
nerd of all
Yeah.
time,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
mm,
Thank God,
mm.
Lord
thank
knows
God.
where we would be.
Mhm.
Right,
We already lost like 500 years with all this nonsense.
Mm,
right,
So he
right.
caught us up.
He's part of that Renaissance, right? One of these moments, really beautiful. All right,
Yeah.
who's this?
So
Is this Cagliostro?
no,
that
it's
Oh no, or Saint
Jermaine.
Germain? Okay,
that's
Saint
Saint
Germain.
Germain.
Okay, Saint Germain.
Mhm.
Yes.
Now we're getting into some wild, wild, wildness. Um,
Now this is well. Let's see. I wanted to. See. Marie is 1610 to 1680. The Comte de Saint Germain is 1691 to 1712. So he should have been before Sir Isaac, but they're about the same time, 1643, 1727. Anyway, around the same time, you get this
mm,
complete opposite alchemist from Sir Isaac Newton. This guy is a social genius. He's a ladies' man, however, he still never gets married and never has any children. Um, but He's described as a celebrated and learned imposter. He hung out with
Yeah.
Casanova, Voltaire, and Mozart. He wrote many sonatas and arias and performed as a professional musician. And as a lab alchemist, he formulated remedies, cosmetics, and dyes. He worked with the dyes. He was selling the dyes to the aristocracy.
Mm,
He had
mm,
so many names. No one could figure
mm,
out where he was from. He claimed, depending where he was and who he was talking to, he would claim royal lineage, whether it was Polish, Austrian, Italian, Portuguese, or whatever, which he could do because he spoke all those languages.
mm, mm.
Yeah. The Count of
Yeah,
Saint
but
Germain is such a wild figure. Oh, go ahead, Shay. Sorry.
I know, like he was one thing famously, he healed a diamond with a flaw for the King of France, and got patronage for a long time because of that. And we know the process that he used then was actually a technique by where you can fill the floor with glass. It's essentially a glass mix.
Mhm.
But he discovered that, and that was it. He was a chemist.
Yes, he
He
was.
did actually do these things,
Yeah.
and he was
And he's producing
imprisoned.
product and he's selling it because he's actually
Yeah,
not a nobleman at all.
but he
No.
was
But
imprisoned
he's
several times because he was useful to people. And then he also terrified people. There is an account of a woman jumping out of the window, and she's describes what we would now know as a hypnotic state. She says,
Mm.
"Oh, I came into his room. I didn't know what he was doing with me, but all of a sudden, I didn't know where I was and what I was doing, and I just had to get away from him because I feared him so much." And so again, he was arrested because they thought he was trying to take advantage of this woman and had thrown herself out the window. But
so
yes, he got arrested so many times. And when he was arrested, it was like, now you're going to work for us. Now you're going to do this. And so
well,
he
we
would
see
flee to a
this.
different country.
But we
Yeah.
see this with so many of these occulted figures and with so many of these alchemists, especially, and with a lot of the Rosicrucian order in and of itself. Like, even to the point of its origin, there is this air of was it a satire? We never will fully know.
Well, him,
And
yeah, and Newton,
even
no.
a lot of
Yeah.
it's satire, but even
But
scholars
they're both
debate this.
chemists,
Scholars
real
debate
ones.
that the whole Rosicrucian thing may have been just a satire made up by children, their own exploration of myth. And
Mm,
there's a lot of interesting stuff there. It doesn't, it doesn't matter because we all know with magic, if you believe it, you make it real. And that's the whole point of the essence of the Rosicrucian theology. So if it is satire, it only proves its bloody point. But what's so wild when you get with this guy is that he literally traveled everywhere and met everyone.
Yeah.
And he's
mm,
this notorious public speaker. And all of
mm,
these magical accounts. So while you were talking, Shay, I went and looked it up because I wanted to read for you guys one of these accounts here. So this
mm.
is an account of the Count of Saint Germain that comes to us from the father of the libertine philosophy, one of the most gross men of all time, Casanova. So
Yeah.
this is what
Who was his
Casanova,
buddy? Yeah.
right? Another charlatan, another notorious liar, right?
Mhm.
Another fake. What does another fake
Mozart wasn't who
manipulator
he
have to
said he was
say?
either. They all hung out.
They all hung out. Well, this guy here, you have a master manipulator seeing another master manipulator and bowing his head to the greater practitioner.
To the
So
greater
let me
con man.
exactly the greater con man. So what does
Yeah.
Casanova have to say about Saint Germain? He says, this extraordinary man, intended by nature to be the king of impostors and quacks, would say in an easy, assured manner that he was over 300 years old, that he knew the secret to universal medicine, the panacea, that he possessed a mastery over nature itself, that he could melt diamonds, professing himself capable of forming out of 10 or 12 small diamonds, one large one of the finest water without any loss of weight. All of this, he said, was a mere trifle to him, notwithstanding his boastings, his barefaced lies, and his manifold eccentricities. I cannot say I thought him offensive. In spite of my knowledge of what he was, and in spite of my own feelings, I thought him an astonishing man of wonder. He was continuously and always astonishing me. Like
And they
Uh,
say
I
he
knew
had
he's
jet
lying
black
about
hair and
everything
he wore a
that I
white
thought,
wig all the time.
right?
oh, they all
So
did. They all did in those days. Yeah. That was the
Yeah.
thing.
But
Yeah, but
you meet
they
these people who have that power of charisma where it's like, I know you're full of shit, but I like you anyway. And that is Saint
yeah.
Germain, you
But
know?
was he? But was he? I mean, there's also that, was because he was such a ladies' man, was
Right.
Casanova just jealous of him?
Mm,
But
true.
very famously, he warned the King of France after he had been released from prison for a long time with the King of France. He said, "There's a revolution coming. You and your wife should go to the country now." So he very famously did a few things like that. Where he actually tried to do good. He's trying to prevent death. He tried to stop the revolution and things like that. So, he was, people think that he was just a con man out for his own advantage, but no, he did place himself in danger several times to try and do good. And, which doesn't quite go along with Casanova's description of him.
And he again, like Nicholas Flamel, is a spirit that you can summon and talk to yourself.
Mm.
Right. And he reminds me of another character. I don't know if you're going to talk about him, but his story is very, very similar to the Italian charlatan Cagliostro, who is
No, I didn't
also
have
an
him on my list.
he's a more later one, but he starts his own reformed version of
Mm.
Egyptian Freemasonry. And why I bring him up is because I've met several magicians who are serious alchemists, and they used his particular form of alchemy. Now, a lot of this goes above my head, but the claim is that they were able to recreate a form of DMT utilize
Mm.
and we're able to experience the divine
Oh yeah, no,
utilizing
he's
magical
he's
methods.
he's bringing the
Yeah,
purple to the kings.
exactly. So
This is
Mhm.
Casanova, oh sorry, Cagliostro, he's more modern, but he seems to be the real deal, even though he's also a liar and a charlatan. So
this
that's
is
the thing
about
with him,
drugs.
Sam.
That's what medicine is. Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
But these guys seem to be both, right? Like, and this is what I want to say is like Saint Germain, he's clearly a liar, but he may also have some juju, like
He
Yeah.
has
Cagliostro is
tons
clearly
of
a liar,
juju,
but
tons
he's
of
clearly got
juju, and we don't
juju.
know if he was a liar. We know
Yeah,
Isaac Newton wasn't a liar because he was
yeah,
autistic, and autistic people can't lie. This
no.
guy
Yeah.
is somewhere in the ADHD narcissist category, and so bravado, lots of bravado.
Yeah, it
Right.
was the court era. It was the
But
court
he could
era.
actually play that harpsichord and write the
Yeah.
aria. He wasn't,
Yeah.
faking.
Yeah. So he did it. Yeah. He did all of this and played the violin. And
Yeah.
he was one of those people, like when you read the accounts about him, he didn't actually boast himself. Like people would come and try and test him. And there was one account of a countess that came and went, "Really? Somebody has said you're this old, which would mean that, you would have been the same age when I was a little girl." And then he's like, "Well, I'm not saying that I am, but this is a description of your father and what your father and I used to do together." And she's like,
Mm,
"Nobody knows that." So he wouldn't boast about it, but he would
Now,
just sort of like he'd deny it implausibly. Oh,
now
you
he's
think
one
you
of
think
these spirits that you can think that's a person that you're sitting
Uh,
next to.
yeah,
mm.
I
That
reckon
when he comes
I
as
know
an
it's
actual person.
Oh
I
wow.
know it sounds weird, but when I was doing the Immortalist stuff, I believe I met him and one other of the Immortals
Yes.
Well,
that actually
in
came and said a
theosophy,
whole lot of ironic stuff to me. And I went,
well,
"What the hell? Who the hell are you?"
we got
And
to talk about theosophy for that
yeah,
because he's one of the ascended masters of
Yeah.
Blavatsky, and
Yeah.
Blavatsky claims to have met him,
He's the
right?
violet
mm,
And
gray.
right, and Blavatsky, as we know, is both an alchemist and also a charlatan, very much in the same realm, and an adventurer. She's
Yeah.
kind of the closest woman counterpart we would have to this particular gentleman right here, I would say.
Except for she was not a looker.
No, she was not a
she
looker.
was when
She
she
was
was
more
young, but
active.
she got
Oh
big.
yeah.
Yeah, she was actually quite attractive when she was younger. If you see
Oh
some
yeah.
of the pictures, yeah,
I just have
So
these visions of her showing up, like I read this one account because she would always smoke these massive cigars.
She didn't give a
And there's
fuck
references that they could be wacky tobacco in said cigars. And she
how
would
much
show
you
up
want
in
to
these
bet.
massive black dresses and and she would demand the attention of everyone in any room that she'd walk in. And she used to have like a staff that she'd like slam on the ground. So imagine this large Russian woman walking into a room in black with a massive cigar, just slamming the ground. And
yeah.
like,
Yeah, I have a couple of Russian girlfriends, and yeah, they always like the attention.
yeah, but
But
yeah.
as
But
a woman in that profession, she had to be tough.
Oh, for
So,
sure.
yeah,
She's so powerful. And even it's one of the wild things is that Blavatsky doesn't become Blavatsky without her partner in crime, Alcott. The
yeah.
world is still a sexist nightmare state, you know, but she is, and we have to give her credit, the most influential occultist of the modern era by bar
Yeah.
none, bar none.
oh, well, William Walter Atkinson comes close, and he was also
Mm.
another theosophist. So theosophist.
Yeah,
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 yeah. They're all coming from Blavatsky's
yeah. It was.
juju,
Oh well, it was
right?
sort of there was sort of that triangle. There was Alcott,
Yeah,
Blavatsky, and Atkinson. They were sort of doing it
right,
together. It was the three of them, the holy
right.
trinity of theosophy. Yeah,
Yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah,
That's a good point. But yeah, my only point is that she, was a huge force and theosophy changed the world. And
yeah.
he is one of the ascended masters of the theosophical tradition.
Mm. Hmm.
Now
So
the
what do we got
witch
here?
hunts, the witch hunts don't end until 1750.
I have that book
And
somewhere.
uh and
Yeah,
so kind of he didn't die till he didn't
I'll
disappear
be.
till 1784. So around the time of Isaac Newton and Comte Saint Germain is when the witch hunts end, and not before. Germain left behind two books, one on the alchemical process, and the other is a triangular book.
Right,
Mhm.
right. A
Yeah.
triangular book. What do you mean by
Yeah.
this?
Well, I have a copy. It's a triangle. It's
It's a
just
triangle?
yeah.
Okay.
And
Mm.
you
Is there a
go
specific reson why it is a triangular book? Is there some kind of
in
occulted version?
triangolo. No, well, use your imagination.
Yeah. For sure. It's a magical yoni, as always, right?
Oh well,
Yeah.
there's
Um,
the two main
yeah,
symbols of alchemy is the upward
right.
triangle and the downward triangle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of
Yeah,
course, right? The
yeah.
pillar of fire and the vulva, the womb of
Hmm.
the universe. But yeah,
Hmm.
that was powerful. Wow, right. Yeah.
Hmm.
And all this alchemy kid stuff, it's only also right, this stuff only becomes unocculted in its most, it only begins to become unocculted with Alpheus Levi. We only have the magical occult revival with him, and that happens in the beginning of the 19th century. So still, not for another like 150 years
Mhm.
after these characters do we not see a public reception of alchemy, an open discussion of
Well,
alchemy.
here you go. Now you have my great grandfather, John Maxon Stillman, 1852 to 1923. And he
Mm.
wrote this book, which was reprinted in the 1960s. And that is the other one. This is
Oh,
before.
it's this one, sorry.
Yeah. And this is the
Oh,
1960s reprinting. He
yeah.
was the first chemistry professor at Stanford University, and he taught a class on alchemy in the 1900s, 1910s, and this 60s reprint. Robert Allen Bartlett, my lab alchemy teacher, he stole it from the library in Sunnyvale when he was 12, and and that's
I've
how
got
he
I've
got
got a
started.
copy of that somewhere. I
Yeah,
would dig it out. I've got it
it's
somewhere. I have
classic.
that book. I've got it somewhere. Mm.
So this
There you
is all
go.
the way out of the closet. He's the head of chemistry at Stanford University, and he's finally there's a academic work on alchemy, which he does not separate from chemistry.
Yeah.
It is chemistry. It's early chemistry.
So
Right.
you've been sitting, your relatives have been sitting in my house for like, I think I've had that book for about 20 years. So there you go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so wild. It's wild for us to think, we have to remember how like this stuff was so incredibly occulted,
Yeah.
right? You could
Mm.
only get access to this stuff prior to, the translations by Alpheus Levi and later translations of him into English by Waite. Prior to that, you had to be initiated in a secret society. And for
Well,
that, you
he
had to be a
decoded
man
it,
and a
and
rich man.
and through science, he's able to tell you the green dragon is this, the red dragon is
Right,
this, the swan is that, and these are chemistry elements.
right.
Yeah.
And so then the
But
next one is your favorite, though. This
I like
Falconelli.
Falconelli,
Falconelli. He was
nineteen
cool. I mean,
twenties.
yeah,
He was
yeah.
probably the physicist, but nobody really knows who he was.
Mm,
He was married. He talks about his wife.
mm,
And he wrote two books before disappearing in 1926. According to his students, uh, he he warned the other physicists of the danger of nuclear fusion, and then disappeared. And he
yeah.
allegedly survived both wars by taking refuge in a
Mm,
remote castle in Spain.
yeah. Yeah, that's the wonderful. Sorry, I'm just going to have to pick up my cat. I'm getting in trouble because it was raining outside and I didn't let him in fast enough. So, yeah, but that's the beautiful thing about Falconelli is that he took these physicists and he actually described the process of fission, and it was written about before the nuclear bomb was
Yeah.
developed. And he warned about it, how this power greater than the sun could destroy our planet, and that we were advancing in science faster than what we were advancing in morals,
Yeah.
right? And that our morals had to catch up with where our science was.
And that's the
Otherwise,
problem with
mm,
separating physical
mm,
chemistry from spiritual chemistry, is that it
mm,
leads to death.
mhm, yeah. So, yeah, but an amazing man, and he just appears to. And one of the visions that he gave, like he also gave these scientists visions of fission taking place, and this scientist describes looking into the fission and seeing the Virgin Mary sitting there.
Whoa.
And it sounds so much like the vision of the children over at Medjugorje, where they saw
Mhm. Yeah.
the Virgin in the bright light, and if it's
Yeah.
that you didn't listen, it almost sounds like the same vision that Falconelli is giving to
Yeah.
them as the Virgin is giving to the kids, in the same
Mhm.
warning.
Mhm.
It makes you wonder what's in that sealed prophecy
Mhm.
of the Virgin
Oh,
that the
you
church
mean
won't
you mean
release.
the one in Portugal?
Yeah,
What's it called? Medjugorje
Medjugorje
is
is.
the later
Yeah,
if that's later
yeah,
in Bosnia. That you're talking about the one in Portugal with they had the vision of the God particle,
yeah.
and the church sealed it up. Two of the kids
Mm,
died of the Spanish flu, and the other one was
mhm.
imprisoned basically in a cloister.
But this is the thing, and I really want to make this point, because Snappy keeps talking about how
Fatima,
all these things.
that's it, Fatima.
Yeah, Fatima, that's right. So Snappy keeps talking about how all of these traditions are occulted, right? But in occult, the word literally means hidden, and it is a scientific term. If something is
Mhm.
occulted, it's the hidden
Yes.
thing. Um, and it's hidden for a reason. The reason is because it gives power, and so the people in power want to control the people who have those power. So if you don't want to be arrested, if you don't want to be executed, you have to, by necessity, keep these things secret, right? You must put them underground. And this is not something that is new. It has existed since the time of the Mithraic mysteries, which also appear to have been scientific.
Yeah.
That people will try and acquire this power by force. You will be imprisoned. You will be put into a monastery. You will be put somewhere where we can control this knowledge that you have. And it's not for general knowledge. We can't let this knowledge get out to everybody because it will make them empowered. So we've got to
Was
keep.
anybody else in the GATE program? They pulled me out of class to do tests on my psychic abilities.
Mm.
Oh,
This was a the gate program was a thing in the United States. They would do an IQ test, and then they'd group you by number, and then they would tell you, you know, you have to do this. You're gonna be a professional. You're gonna, and then they told me I was unmainstreamable, but I
Mhm.
was psychic, and then they do all these tests on me.
Yeah. And see, and if they can't control it by putting it in prison, they will discredit it. Right. And we've got to come back to always those tenets of propaganda. You know, psychic abilities. I've been tested at school for psychic abilities, but it was pretty obvious because like poltergeist activity was happening in the classroom. So, but they will try and make you ridiculous if they
Yeah.
can't control you. So, if they can't kill you, and in these days, assassination doesn't happen of political leaders like it used to because they can assassinate them by making them ridiculous. Right. So then that's how they character
Interesting.
assassinate people today. So
yeah.
this is all part of the occult process. This is why these organizations go underground. The Masons hid because the Catholic Church wanted to get rid of them. You know,
Mm.
the Templar Knights fled away and hid in Scotland because the French and the Pope
Getting
wanted to
past my
control the power that they had. And the alchemists, because these techniques are simple enough for anybody to do in a home lab, they don't want you knowing that you can go out and with a bit of effort and time, make as much gold as you want. You can get, because if you get wealthy, you get powerful. You know, money is a protection, just like wisdom is. You can control the poor. That's why it's in the interest of governments to keep people poor. You know, but if you teach them alchemy and anybody can go out and make gold out of, the quartz in the ground, it's very hard to control people if they're not, dirt poor. So, this is why by necessary, the
This is
government either had to keep it occult,
yeah.
right?
It's that
Or
it's that
control
it's
it,
that
or,
dual-edged sword of government and society, right? Because
yeah.
government provides us with so many services, but those services then we become reliant upon because and this is what they do. They say, we'll provide you the service, and then we take away the education and we take away the learning of that tool. And now that
Mhm,
tool has become a specialized thing that is held within the hands of an elite, and it's become further occulted. But there's a
mhm,
wild thing with alchemy, just like with muse magic, that we need to fully unpack is that both of these are realized through the reception and the play of nature. And so you can't ever really break. So, what's so interesting about this tradition is that on one hand, you've proven to us clearly that there's a distinct lineage that never breaks, that
Yeah.
manages
mhm,
to survive all the
Yeah.
persecution. But at the
Yeah.
same time, with alchemy, we see revivals where people just naturally figure this stuff out on their own through the play of science and through the experiential nature. Maybe they don't come to the heights of the great alchemists, but this is something that is intuitive and is able to be realized through practice and through perception, through reality. And so anyone has the potential to get into this, right?
Yes.
mm,
Yes.
mm,
And of course, this list is only the ones who published books or someone wrote a book about them that we
mm,
Right.
have. There are plenty of books we don't have, and there are plenty of alchemists that
Plenty of
there's
history
no
that's
record
lost.
of. Yeah.
Yeah,
mm.
right. These are the
Yeah.
these are the famous ones.
And Isaac
Yeah.
Newton didn't pull it out of his ass either. He was part of a secret society that these papers were handed down. He got Hypatia's papers in his hands because
Mhm,
somebody hid them and hid them and hid them every century until
mhm,
finally they found someone who understood them.
mhm.
They
Yeah.
kept
So
them
jealous.
like they're holy and they're like burning the candle and praying to it. And he's like, fuck, this is math.
Yeah. 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 And she
Yeah.
was, amazing Hypatia.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'll put a link up to this book, Hypatia's Heritage, and we should read it. And there is some non evidence of in this book of Maria from
Cool.
early
Oh,
sources
cool.
in this book. But it shows that yeah, it's something that we can all do. It is something that we can do. We can take this power back. you know, gold is useful to so many things. It's not just a means of power. It takes down inflammation. It gets rid of infection.
Yeah.
It's a really important substance. It's one of the
Yeah.
very few heavy metals that are inert in the human body. And by doing this, we actually evolve our spirit. We become a stronger person. We become a more balanced person as well.
And that's why Marie Murdoch, that's why she wrote the book of simplified chemistry, because she's like, this is retarded. This is something that any woman can be doing in her freaking kitchen.
Yeah, and
And
yeah,
it's made out to be this like really scary thing you have to be a monk to do. And like, no, this
So
and
is
that's the
life happening.
It's the
go ahead.
tyranny of academia. Academia forgets that the word academy comes from a circle of trees.
Yeah.
People used to go and sit under a circle of trees. That was an academy, right? That's the word. That's what it means, and discuss stuff,
Yeah.
right? You could
Well,
anybody
this
could
is
go.
why both Galileo and Sir Isaac Newton had their epiphanies while what? Sitting under a tree.
Yes,
But the
yeah,
problem with science is that we're all dust. We're both a particle and a wave. And so therefore
mm,
you can't cut us in half and define us as either. It's both.
mhm.
And that's why science is never going to give us the full totality of the truth, because by its necessity, it has to be either or. You can't
And
be
I
both a
maintain
particle and a
that
wave.
until we do our lab work, the spirituality is just as disjointed.
Mm,
Yeah. So talk
mhm.
about this a bit, about this lab work and why spirituality is disjointed without lab work. And we don't need to get too in depth at this
Because it
part. We're
has
going to do
to
a second
work.
part.
That's
Yeah,
okay. Let's talk about love magic, because this is the perfect
right,
arena for that. I
right,
had so much fun at the end of our last talk when the three of us completely disagreed about love magic. And I
right.
love this, right? And some of it is just the wording, like
And we're
Shay
all
was using the
passionate.
word control to have your life handled. I was using the word control as balanced with surrender.
Right,
And you were using the word control to describe systems of power control. Now, these are three different conversations, right? And
absolutely.
so I imagine that there's something like that going on with love magic. Now, you, Snappy, were talking about Ovid and prohibitions against love magic. I was talking about how I wouldn't want to be with anyone who would do love magic on me. I don't want to do it either. People ask me for that, and I send them to someone like Shay. And Shay was like, I do it all the time. It fucking works. What are you
Well,
talking
she's
about?
also,
I'm like,
she brought up a good point though, because it's like anyone who's dabbled in the magic and knows people who play, what is the first thing that 90% of people are doing? It's a love spell, male, female, what have you. That's
I
where
would
people are
say that
getting their
this is
play,
why we have a blind
right?
about the new moon. This is why we have a blind about the new moon. Because the first thing you're going to do is hurt your ex and make someone who doesn't like you, which is retarded and infantile, right? And so, and so that's why that blind is there, is to protect you from yourself,
Right,
right?
Yeah.
right.
If you want to hurt your ex, you shouldn't be doing magic. Right, it's
No.
that
If
that
you
that
want to hurt
if you're
anybody,
doing
go home.
and all of the myths and legends about what happens to you if you drop to that low, right?
Mm,
Even Medea,
Right.
when she goes down low, she hurts herself
yeah,
and the people
There's
around her.
yeah.
there's also this.
But
Go ahead, sorry.
yeah, but the thing with love magic, once you do it enough, you've got to make sure that it's about you becoming more attractive, right?
Yes.
And you'll put your makeup on and you'll want to, like, people want to attract specific persons. I like that guy. I'm going to dress up. I'm going to put my nose, I'm going to get glamorized. I'm going to
Yeah.
make myself, charming, charm, because I want that person. Of course, you want a particular person, and that's all right. So, but the thing is, you're making yourself more attractive to that person, right? And people think
Sometimes
it's,
there isn't
so,
even a person.
yeah.
Sometimes people
Mm.
just they want to be able to magnetize someone they're gonna like.
Well, and that's really usually what happens is
Yeah.
people come and they want a spell for that person. What ends up happening is the magic, love magic makes them more attractive and they actually get what they deserve rather than what they're after, what they're
Mm,
obsessing about.
mm,
They get a good love finally
yeah.
rather than getting something that's
Yeah.
you know, and it doesn't force that person. That's the myth of magic. People think that love magic is going to force that person to like you. No, you're forcing yourself to be more likable to that person,
Well,
right?
this is where I would. Okay, so
No, but
this
there
is
are
where we're going to
binding
get
spells.
into.
There's
Yeah,
Yes,
dominature
there
spells.
are,
And
hundred
this
exactly.
is
percent.
what Snappy's talking about is
Yeah,
a can of worms
But
and you don't want to
that's
do
the
it.
low magic,
Yeah.
and then there's
yeah.
the, you know, if
Right,
it's
but
used
we have to
correctly.
make a distinction, right? And you're getting at it, and it's very important, right? The big thing, and the you see this in so many different aspects of the tradition, but in my mind, Crowley just puts it in the most simplest of terms. Okay,
Yeah.
you've got to harmonize with the universe to do your true will. The
Mhm.
true will means that you're in truth, you're in love with the universe, and you will harm none,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
So if you are following your true will, then any kind of magic you do is just going to attract love to you. It's going to attract beauty and
Yes.
opportunity. It's not about a specific person. The prohibition that Ovid is talking about, the evil of something like what Jason did to Medea, is the usurpation of will. It is the
Mm.
breaking of the individual's, and this is where we see all of that evil magic. You see it in the same thing in your tradition in Voodoo, right? Because what is the evilest magic there? It's the zombie. And what are you doing? You're usurping a person's will, right? It's
Mm.
that same thing. So this is, I
Mm.
think, what we have to do. There's, as you pointed out, we can have black, gray, and white aspects of any kind of magic. I mean, all of this terminology is
Depends
is
on
is
where you're
limited,
at. Yeah.
but you can see it from this. A white version of a love spell is empowering yourself to be more confident, to go out into the world and share yourself. A gray version would be calling love into you, but not
Yes.
specific love. A black version would be, I want this person to be my lover. And it would be something like we see this in the PGM. There's a spell, the Sword of Dardanus, where it's literally, I'm going to grab her by the hair and I'm going
Yeah,
to
no,
pull
that's
her to
messed up.
me,
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so,
And clearly Saint Germain was screwing around with
and Nova, these
mesmerism
guys
and
are doing some
stuff,
gross
and
stuff.
it
Yeah.
backfired on him, right? Like he was trying to
Yeah.
make cute with this lady and she was like, weird energy, I'm out the window, right?
Yeah,
Right,
literally jumped like 3 stories onto the street, you know.
right, right.
Yeah. So, yes, but and again, magic takes you on that personal journey. If people start being jealous and bitter and vengeful, we've got all of the myths and legends about what happens to you if you use magic for that. And I
That's a good
believe
point.
that the magicians in the Greek magical papyrus, they, you know, they used to sell their magic, and I think they would have knocked on the door and they went, "I want that person bound to me," and they would have gone, "Well, do you really? Come and sit down. Let's
Well,
discuss
no,
what's going to
because all
happen."
these people are asexual and all these alchemists, right? Like they could give two shits, right? They're super nerds and they're just not thinking about that, right?
But on
I
a
But
think a lot of
purely
the,
clearly, a lot
financial
of people, like
basis,
they come to us, would come to them for this kind of thing.
put it this way,
but
on
I
a
think I
purely
think Faye's
financial
making a good
basis,
point.
you
Yeah,
want your client to survive so you can get more work out of them later. If they're going to do something it's going to destroy themselves, it's not good for anybody, you know. So
you see this.
there's a counseling aspect there, you know,
But
but
you
if
see
they're
this
really
kind of.
insistent and go, "Look, I really want that," you go, "Okay, you asked for it." I mean, and the
Knock
Well, this
gods
is
yourself
the
do
out.
thing,
that
though,
too, and the
right? You
gods
see
do
this.
that in the myths as well, you
Yeah,
know. Really, you really want that?
this is what I was
Yeah,
just about to get at, right? So
yeah,
the stage, the shaman, right?
yeah.
In the most traditional sense, acts as a mirror, right? Acts
Mhm.
as a mirror. And I remember talking to a friend of mine who is a traditional shaman, and they do every once in a while, darker magic for pay. And I asked them specific. I'm not going to mention them because it's a private thing, as
Mhm.
you understand, both of you. But like,
Yeah.
they're in a Haitian tradition and they've done all kinds of stuff.
Mhm.
And when I asked him about it, he goes, "Look, this is someone else's karma. It's my
Mhm.
job as the priest to introduce you to the Loa, and it's the Loa who will make you face yourself and have to go through this. So if you
Yeah.
want to do a
Mhm.
curse magic, then you're going to have to deal with that curse now. You've just
Yeah,
brought down the spirit of whatever Loa you invoked upon yourself,
yeah.
and that's going to take
You
you
know,
on a journey of self-discovery. It's the devil card in the tarot.
Yeah.
Be
yeah,
careful
yeah.
what you wish for. And that's
Do
what
you
he's,
want
it's like,
the?
it's not my problem. It's their, I'll give you whatever you want.
That's
I'm the
right.
shaman. But
Do you
So
want?
whatever
the
you ask for will
business
send you
of
on a
getting what
journey.
you want is this is life, you know? I mean,
Yeah,
this is what I learned in the sex
Well,
cult, and
it's yeah.
especially
It's
in the
also
beginning, it was just focused on women whose desire is so shoved down that they don't even know what they want.
right.
50% of American women still say on a survey they've never had an orgasm.
mm,
There's no partner you can pick that will fix that problem. That's something going on with your nervous
you need.
system, right?
Yeah, and they
That's
need a better.
shoving down your desire to where you don't even recognize it anymore. You don't even know what
Yeah.
it is.
No, what you're
Yeah.
talking about is so serious, though. I took in first year of university, I took a introduction to human sexuality class, and we had a professor who had been doing, psychological therapy for couples for 50 years. And she would
Mm.
Mm,
tell us just the most absurd things
mm,
where she had like couples who were engaging in thigh sex and engaging in belly button sex and thinking that was intercourse and wondering why they
But
couldn't
what
have
are we,
children.
Marie Antoinette? We don't even know how it's done. What is
This is the
this? Right?
thing. Like, this is the level of shame that
But so
some people are
we have it
experiencing.
where the only people who are supposed to know, only women who are supposed to know about sex are hookers, and
Right,
you're not
mm.
supposed to marry them. And if you
right.
know something about sex, you're unmarriageable.
Yeah, right. You're right. You're unmarriageable. And this is the thing. One of the things she
And
told
the
me too
only
is that,
since Reich was also an alchemist. He did lab work. He made machines, and he was the first one to say that your orgasm is you. It's inside you, and
right,
that's why fascism is the opposite of alchemy. Is because you
Mm,
need your orgasm. Fascism is is a symptom of anorgasmia, according to Reich. It's
mm.
faucial armoring to the point where you cannot experience pleasure. And the world starts to look really scary when
have you ever
you
seen,
can't experience pleasure.
one of my, it's probably my favorite movie of all time, The Holy Mountain by
Oh, yeah.
Jodorowsky.
Yeah.
So what you just said is Uranus, the character Uranus, who has all those
Mm,
young men castrate
mm,
themselves and stick
mm.
their testicles in his temple. Well, they become the police attacking everyone else. That's what
It's,
fascism is. You're exactly
it's,
right. It's the denial
Mm.
of sex, and it's that extreme resistance of change. The extreme hierarchy, extreme empowerment under authority,
yeah.
right?
And
Yeah,
he knew
Right.
and
fascism. He saw them goose stepping. He ran like hell.
Yeah.
yeah. When you go back to, let's go back to tantra. Tantra, the release of the female orgasm is
It's,
the basis of the magic. Tantra is magic, whether
yeah,
it's Indian or Buddhist or whichever way you want to look at it.
yeah,
But it's
yeah,
the release of that female orgasm, which is the creative force of the universe.
yes.
And for the man to be fully empowered, he has to learn how to induce that in the woman. And for the woman to be fully empowered, she has to learn how to get the man to induce that in her. Whether that's, there's a masculine
And
man
this
person in a
requires
same
that
sex couple.
balance of surrender and control.
It also
Right.
requires that each individual take personal power and control of their personal power. If a woman
Take
hasn't had an
responsibility for
orgasm,
your orgasm. Yeah.
that's right. If you haven't had an orgasm, and if there's any women out there listening saying, I've never had one, I can't, rubbish, you can. But
Yeah.
saying you can't is an excuse. You get your partner, you hold on to them by the ears, and you make them give you an orgasm. You deserve it. And they deserve the knowledge that they
That's
can give you one. All right. It is a two-way responsibility. Right. There's nothing worse than a man that goes, I'm such a terrible lover. I've never given a woman an orgasm. Guys, you can. There are many ways. It doesn't
yeah.
always involve a penis, and you
Uh,
can do it. And once and you ask any man what the best part of lovemaking is, and he'll go giving a woman an orgasm. Right. Always, right? Because it makes him realize his power. And this is why the churches have suppressed sexuality, because it is power. And it is the basis of all magic is the sexuality. And it comes out in alchemy. And
Well,
the basis of alchemy is the release of that sexual power,
there's also
right? To
something
empower
really,
your, yeah.
yeah. There's also some, like, you're so right, right? Like, we see so much of this as the essential aspect of the magical tradition, using that where does orgasm take us? It takes us into the heights of gnosis. It's the
Yeah.
same place of ecstasy that you can get through dancing, through meditation, through ecstatic prayer. You can get to easiest through the
Mhm,
orgasm. And this is why you
mhm,
see so many later magical traditions that expand upon the alchemists, like the chaos traditions, focus so heavily upon the power of the orgasm, right? Because
mhm.
that orgasm can take you into that place of no mind, where you can be in that energy of the fool and be in that creative output where you're living your true life, you're being your best self, you're in that true connected form, right?
And if
And go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, and if you can focus while the orgasm is happening, you go into the act of lovemaking with one purpose, and if both of you can orgasm for that purpose, and even better, if you can simultaneously orgasm for that purpose, which is what Tantra tries to teach you to do, but it doesn't have to be simultaneous. That energy, when it is released, can create a new life, a new human being. And you're going to use that magical child to create something else with just maintaining that bit of focus while it happens. Mhm.
And
It's
go
worth
ahead.
saying that women, this is science. Not all women have the same orgasm. We,
That's correct.
some women don't have clitoral orgasms. Some women
Oh,
don't have orgasms with penetration. Some women only have orgasms when they're doing physical activity.
mhm,
Well, there's so
mhm,
many different versions of sexuality. Okay, I've met women who only wanted to be tops, who only wanted to be with men in a submissive role and weren't
Mhm.
gay. Like,
mhm.
the human
Oh yeah,
sexuality is as varied as it
and
can
vice
come,
versa, and everything
you
in
know,
between. Yeah, yeah.
right?
Yeah,
So there's
you,
everyone out there.
you can have an orgasm through mental stimulation. I mean, I think all of us have had an orgasm in our dreams, right?
Yeah.
So that's our mind. Nothing's playing with our body. We are. It's our mind when we're asleep. You can do that when you're awake. I mean, some of my favorite orgasms is just with having someone play with my neck. It gives you such a
Right.
deep, full body like experience. And it certainly extends down there, but it's a whole body experience. You don't
There are even
isolate one.
ecosexuals who make love
Mm,
with planet Earth. Have you seen Annie Sprinkle's hilarious ecosexual
yes.
porn where she's dressed up as a flower? It's awesome. And
Yeah.
you do a workshop with her. Guess what? You can lie down on the ground and have an orgasm.
Yeah.
No hands, no person, no
Yeah. So
nothing.
yeah, it is an essential part of being human. Do not give it up. Do not let any organization take it away. Don't trick
And
yourself into thinking
also,
that you can't have one because you can.
if you're
You can.
asexual like Isaac Newton, that's also fine.
Yeah.
Right. But
Even
so
even
much.
guys that are castrated can have orgasms. So
Yeah,
it
but
is
he was
possible.
clearly having brain gasms all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
But so much of the tantric tradition though is really interesting, right? Because like the tantra it's so much more in depth than just a lot of like that sexual magic. It's really this whole ancient tradition of the weave, of the
Mm.
uniting everything to experience that ideal of the absolute. And we have
Mhm,
various forms of tantrika. The one that I'm most familiar with is the work of Abhinavagupta, who is a
mhm,
Kashmiri Shaivite scholar.
mhm,
And
mhm,
he was all about the aesthetic practice and also about the ritual lovemaking as well. But everything would be what you see in Abhinavagupta is the realization of the myth as a form of total performance, where you would go into
mhm,
the temple and you would put the myth on display, where your partner would be Parvati, you would be Shiva, you engage in the act of lovemaking, but while you're doing this, you're surrounded by incense, you're surrounded by all these singers and dancers, you're in a
mhm,
literal movie, you're
Yeah.
having this performance of that
mhm.
story of Shiva and Parvati uniting and reforming the divine androgyne. You're a part of it and you're observing it at the same time. And this
Well,
is
what do
that
you
act
guys
of
think
becoming.
about that? Because they say your tantric partner is not supposed to be your domestic partner in the Shaivite tradition, and for example, clergy people, or Zosimos, I'm not saying that they're not being sexual, but they're not having domesticity. It's not the
No,
same.
because this
And
is not about
so,
It's
what do you
procreating children.
think? Is that something?
it did.
Can you have
Well,
all
we
that with just one
all right. So
person, or
we get there are many traditions in Tantra, and we literally get the Western term, the right hand path and the left hand path from Tantra. Like
right?
if you went to a circle where your partner's on your right hand side, it's generally a domestic partner. If you went to a circle where your partner's on your left hand side, it doesn't have to be a partner. But again, this is it's again, it is one of those situations where don't let people put too many rules on it.
Right,
Of
right.
course, you can have tantric sex with your partner. Of course, you can, but you can also have tantric sex with somebody who's not your
Well,
partner.
Yeah.
You can even have tantric sex with somebody who doesn't realize they're having tantric sex with you.
that's
You
because
know,
when we're
That's
dealing with
definitely
something
true.
like when you're dealing with something like Kashmiri Shaivism, we're dealing
uh,
with an initiatic monastic tradition of sadhus, and right.
mm,
So these are people who have taken the vow to abstain from familial life, and
Right.
the kind of sex that they are engaging in is taboo. And so
mm,
there's this understanding that if you were to walk this path, you are going to become unclean. Right now,
mm,
you can reincorporate all this uncleanliness and achieve enlightenment, but you are walking a path that is outside of the status quo. It is outside of the norm, and there has to be an initiation, there has to be a separation, right? And we have to recognize too that within a lot of the Kashmiri Shaivite tradition, right, there's very few women. The women who are
Mm,
involved, it's dubious. There's a lot of really weird stuff going on.
mm,
mm,
Accusations of slavery, accusations of underage, but most of the
mm,
time it's actually people who would be considered third gender,
mm,
the hijra who are
right,
forming these
right,
or
right.
these receptive gay men. So a lot of
mm,
this tantric sex is being practiced by monastic men,
mm.
people who are engaged in this sadhu type of a
But
lifestyle,
this
and it's
brings
full
up the
And then,
difference
purpose of
between
enlightenment.
orgasm and reproduction.
Right,
Clearly, every woman
right.
knows you can reproduce without an orgasm.
Yeah, yeah,
you know, and
yeah,
absolutely.
and so these
and
are
you have a look.
different. These are two different things going on that are not the same.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
you
There's just, I
you
think, within the Indian traditions, there's all this, so much about Tantra too is about, right? You're incorporating everything. So this has been made too much of an over aspect in the West, but it is clearly a
yeah.
part of the tradition where you
Well,
need
Oh,
they
to,
have
there's
birth
but the
control.
first.
Obviously, they have birth control because the whole point there is to not reproduce.
but just, yeah,
Well,
just let me finish my point here. Where
Hmm.
what it is right, as Shay brought up, it's a left-handed path, but what does that mean? If you're going to experience the one, you have to incorporate everything. So that those
Mm,
taboos that you
mm,
experience, where you feel something is viscerally disgusting or shocking, and in much of the tantric world, right, you're dealing with a culture in where sex is vilified, where
right,
the
mm,
eating of
right,
meat is vilified,
right.
where this kind of lifestyle as being a sadhu is vilified. So all of
mm,
these things are breaking of different levels of taboo in order to experience the all. The performance of sex is also about breaking down the law, right? This is also why they engage in the eating of filth and the eating of flesh. All of these things are about to remind you that the body, that the universe is all united and to
mm,
transcend the limits of form. And
Mm-hmm.
mm,
so all of this kind of wild breaking of taboo that we see is purpose driven. But again, it's
mm.
been way too highlighted in the West,
Well, that's
And
the
and that's
critique of
it's
Western.
only.
Is it's not the same. If you don't have any taboos, then you're not doing it.
Right.
Well, no, you've got to understand that there are lots of different tantric traditions traditionally. There is no one tantric tradition. I mean, one of the worst ones, I believe, is the Buddhist tantric tradition, where Chogyal Rinpoche, who's just done another tour around the world, says that the best way to do tantra is to go and find an empowered woman and rape her, right? And
Whoa.
he wonders why the world is shocked by that, right? But they did have these
Shit.
female hermits, and they would have like the teacher, like the grandmother, the mother, and the daughter, and they will be learning the tradition. And so the Buddhists would go and find these female hermits up in the Alto Himalayan mountains and go there and rape them to steal their energy so they could become more
Jesus.
empowered. And if you have a look at all of the tantric imagery within Mahayana Buddhism, it is about destroying that female to take her power.
Mm,
So,
Right.
and that's a Buddhist tantric tradition. It's not peace, love, and
mm,
barren rice, guys. It's just not.
right.
But
Yeah.
that's, I mean, but the idea of Tantra is to, like you said, it means to weave the male and female energy together. It's about understanding your pleasure, how that we are living in a world that is designed for pleasure,
Mm.
and taking that and also amplifying your orgasm with purpose. These things are common no matter what tradition you look at, right?
Mm.
Even the worst of the traditions or the best of the traditions,
Mm.
right? And alchemy is a tantric tradition. Alchemy is about weaving the masculine and the feminine together,
Well,
or this
that's how it
weaving of the
manages to turn you
opposites in
queer.
nature.
But it's
But
Yeah,
not
we're
just
weaving
about the
of,
but
masculine and feminine with either alchemy or with tantra. It's about incorporating the all, right? So we're going through this
physically what
process of
it means
incorporating all
to
nature.
take the opposites
physically what
and
it
make a
means
whole.
is that
Yeah.
women learn how to ejaculate and men learn how to not to.
Yeah,
Well, that's
Right.
again that's an oversimplification,
It
but yeah,
is. It
part of
is,
it.
but
yeah.
mechanically that's the thing. And so then that's it's a whole nother chakra when you're encountering
Huh?
the self that is of the opposite gender, my masculine side, your feminine side, and all that.
Right.
Yeah.
This is what we
Yeah.
talk about, right? We were talking about at the beginning, right? This alchemical path is also connected to that Western chthonic snake path. It is the, the best representation of this path. And that's the feminine side of the tree. And that's the side that has been blacklisted,
Right.
right? So
Mm.
this is that essence. What does the feminine have to do? The feminine has to come into incorporation and into empowerment. She has to learn how to dominate, how to be an emperor, just as the masculine needs to learn how to suppress his
Yeah.
desires, learn how to control his desires, learn how to submit. This is why the icon in
Have
the
a
Greek would be
prostate orgasm, yeah,
right.
which is going to be more like a female orgasm. It keeps
Exactly.
going, and then it's like, oh, and then afterwards you're like, ah, hold me,
The
and
masculine
she
has to
ejaculates and
surrender,
she rolls over and falls asleep.
right? Attis surrenders and is carried by the beast to the stars, where Medea, she burns the shit down and declares herself king. So, right, this is the two
Sorry, I love
sides of
it.
the
I just
same
love
coin. But
it.
it's true. It's true, right?
It
That's what
is
happens,
true. It's
Yeah.
true.
right?
Yeah,
But
Yeah.
Medea
yeah,
does a Kali. She's
yeah, she
Mother
does.
Kali.
This is what you got to do. This is what you got to do. The feminine has to ascend the throne and become the Zeus, and the
Yeah.
masculine has to reject the nymphs and that abuse, that obsession, and become the great mother. Right? So
Mhm,
it's you have to
mhm,
reform the rebus, right? Which we
mhm,
see all throughout the alchemical tradition, that divine faunes.
Yeah.
And if
mhm.
you are, whatever gender you are, gender is so complicated,
Yeah.
and we all have to do both sides at different points in your
Yeah.
life, you
Yep.
know? So
Absolutely.
there's always a time for domination and there's a time for surrender. And you need to
Yeah.
learn how to balance this. It's that
And
lover's path,
what I
right?
do when I do my tantric classes is I start with the tantric poetry. Right?
Mm,
There is tantric poetry in Hindu, Buddhist, and Western traditions. Right? And some of the alchemical poetry is beautiful tantric poetry. And then there's one called St. John of the Cross. He wrote it
Mm,
about, upon a darksome night, I found my love
mm.
hidden deep within the trees. And he talks about swapping himself. This is like a Catholic priest talking about
Yeah, and
swapping
he's writing
himself
this
with his
locked in a
love.
coffin. They kept him a prisoner, and he wrote all this
Yeah.
incredible love poetry.
Yeah, but he talks about sneaking out, finding his partner, swapping with the partner, becoming the feminine, and they're becoming the masculine and laying beneath the
Mm,
trees. And
mm,
it's beautiful tantric poetry. Right?
mm.
So it's stimulating the mind again, as well as, in a way that pornography doesn't.
And
It's
he was friends with
stimulating.
the Teresa of Avila.
Yeah. And she wrote some amazing tantric poetry as well.
And
Yeah.
she was a character before she became a nun too.
Yeah.
She was no
That,
nun before she became a nun.
So
yeah.
one of
Yeah.
the things I want to talk to you guys about, though, before we start to wind down here, is there is a kind of negative aspect to both, to all these alchemical tradition, whether Indian, Chinese, or Western, or what have you. Um, there is that side that we see with Casanova and with Saint Germain of personal empowerment and the breaking of taboo in order to be free of law, in order to commit
Mhm.
atrocity, in order to gain,
Mm.
like in the Indian tradition, you have this talk of city. Now, within the more monastic traditions, they always say city is not the point. And if you truly get,
Mm.
once you get the city, you don't want the city. But there is that witchcraft tradition, which is about doing these horrific things in order to have the cities, in order to empower yourself. And we see this within the West as well. There is this
Mm,
domination type magic. There is this black magic, which is about breaking free of responsibility, breaking free of the connection to humanity, and
mm,
being empowered in total freedom. And this is
mm,
kind of like that radical left hand path. And I think like we see this on full display with someone like Epstein. Like it's very clear in my mind that they're engaged in this kind of, black magic. We just got to call it what it is, right?
mm. Right. Or spying and blackmailing. Yeah, blackmailing or black magic.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but I mean, I'm a city practitioner, and the healing that I do is called city. Right. So people
Mm,
forget that city is not always. I do think, and please don't take this the wrong way, but I do think that sometimes when people are pushing and pushing and not getting results, they go further and further towards their what they feel is the dark in order to
mm,
free themselves. And sometimes it works for
mm,
people.
mm.
But it's one of those things, you don't always have to do that. You don't always have to go towards the dark. You don't have to go and sit in the chod ground, sit on the corpses and eat the rotting flesh.
Well,
Although,
here's where it's useful not to do your lab work, right? So,
Right.
yeah.
so when I was trying to figure out, I have this autoimmune fuckery, right? And I'm trying
Mm,
to figure it out. Nobody knows anything about it. Just forget it. So, Tibetan medicine. Do you know what
mm.
their remedy is for what I've
Mm.
got?
Oh,
That
well,
I
hang on, I don't
should
know.
eat the flesh of my enemies. That's what
So,
they say.
I
Okay.
know
So
Tibetan
what
medicine
I
is, yeah.
did was I wrote a book about that.
Mm,
I encountered my dark side by
mm,
writing a book in the worst part of my menopause when I felt the most murderous and cold hearted.
mm,
I wrote a book about psychic assassins, and
mm.
actually, it helped.
I mean, and this is where we come back to that allegory thing again. Like, I do know a lot of people in tantric, in Tibetan medicine would take that
Mm.
absolutely literally. But again, eating the flesh of your enemies. I put it another way. When I talk to women all the time, I've left you. This person's left me, and it's terrible. I've been betrayed.
Mm.
Success is the best revenge.
Correct.
It is about raising your own power again to the point where your enemies don't matter anymore. You have eaten their flesh. You have
And no
become
one can leave you.
successful.
Yeah.
You are successful, right? And they will burn with looking at your success, right? It will hurt them worse than anything else. If you want to grump around and be a victim, you know what? They've won.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
You
minute
know,
that you
mm,
take it back and you become successful, they burn. And that's eating the flesh of your enemies. Success is the best revenge.
Yeah.
The best revenge. I mean, and that's what's happening with Dr. Ammon. I love it. The universities that rejected him, he now has the biggest attic Greek classes in the world.
Yeah.
And they will be burning because of that. Those academic institutions will burn at the fact that, oh, his class is bigger than mine. That's how petty they are. That's how petty your enemies are. You know, it is burning them. And that's why they're going to try and demonize him. And he will rise above the demons. He will rise above the demons and he'll be successful because he's
right.
banishing his demons with laughter.
Yes.
You can take it to the dark side and take literally and go and hunt down your enemies and eat their eyeballs. Yeah, might give you satisfaction for a little while. I don't particularly want to eat anybody's eyeball, but I'd
This is
rather
not a
have
good
them sit
idea.
sit.
I was just
No,
watching
I'd
a
rather have them
scientist
sitting on
explaining why you don't want to be a cannibal. And I'm like, we need this information. Why? Oh, right. Because of the Epstein files.
because there
Right.
are people out there who take allegory literally,
Yeah.
right? And we have
Yeah.
to understand that there is so much allegory out there.
Yeah.
People will burn if you are successful,
Mm.
right? And that's the best thing, watching your enemies and you're going, I used to write for somebody who stole a magazine off me. right? And then my magazine became so much more successful. I've written 28 books, and
Mm.
she can't organize anything original of her own. Not an original thought. She has to try and steal other people's thoughts. You
Right.
know,
It's
you know.
wild. A
But
big
if you
part of the
don't publish, then you're just sitting there waiting to get stolen from again.
You're being the
right.
victim. That's right. Yeah.
There's another aspect to this too, though, right? Where, like, we're talking about all these different paths, and it's really important that we understand, especially when we're talking about the Hindu and Indian Buddhist traditions, is the concept of dharma. When we're seeing people who are engaging in the extreme left-hand path, so like the Agori, not just any tantrikas, the Agori and related groups to them, who but these people are engaged in a very different path. When they walk that path to enter the graveyard, they've already committed to die, right? They understand that this is about the destruction of the body. And
Mm.
they know that whatever they engage in is going to end in a brutal death for them. Like, this is a full self-awareness before they even begin on this particular path, because and so it's so hard for us who are not in that dharma to even be able to relate or understand, because this
Yeah.
is such an extreme path, and it's about that radical incorporation.
Mm.
How do we incorporate that which we cannot, you know that which has been cast outside? When you enter the graveyard too, in traditional Indian and Buddhist societies, was the place where all of the mentally ill would be placed as well, all of the
Mm.
diseased, so all of the outcasts. So this was
Mm.
someone who was willingly becoming an outcast and walking the path unto death. There's an
Mm.
understanding, like they're breaking the ultimate taboo. And so to eat the human flesh is to kill oneself.
Mm.
To do that is to go insane. And
Mm.
Mhm.
that is literally what they are engaged in.
Mm.
So much of this alchemy we got to understand as like variations of these extreme paths, and it has to be fallen with that idea of knowing the self.
Yeah.
Not all of us are going to, it's so hard for us to understand some of these more
Mm.
radical paths because we're not in that karma, we're not in that energy at all.
Mm.
But everything in the universe is connected, and everything in the universe is beautiful. And
Yeah.
this is why it's
100%.
become so uncomfortable. Like, how do you make the
100%.
excrement beautiful? You got to ask
Yeah.
the Agori.
Yeah. But the thing is, you can honor that path. You can honor their
Of
choice,
course, of
and
course.
but
Yeah,
it doesn't have to be your choice.
no,
You can and that's the thing. You got to figure out what's the best choice for you. I
yeah.
often have people come to me who are dying. I had a beautiful lady, I won't say who, but I met her a few years ago, and she has cystic fibrosis, and she was like, "Hi, my name is blah, and I'm dying." And I was
Oof.
like, "Don't feel special. We're all dying. We're all dying." I said, "Well, you just might get there a little bit faster than us." And this is what the Agori as well. They're on that death path, but we're all on that death path.
Yeah,
Even if we live 400 years,
absolutely.
even if
Yeah,
we do our alchemy.
identification is the
Yeah,
issue. I am not
Yeah,
yeah,
my
yeah,
illness, but I'm not my body. I'm not definitely
mhm,
not my car.
yeah.
The
right.
identification is the issue.
Yeah, but not. I think what the Agori do is face the death that most people aren't willing to face, and you
Mm.
can't have
Absolutely.
power in life until you face that death.
Right.
And understand that this is part of the cycle that's coming for us. What are we doing with this cycle? What are we doing
I
with
got
it?
to see I got to see when I was in Mumbai, these
Yeah.
they're really famous. They're talked about in many different publications, but they call them the dancing babas. And they're these Shaivite sadhus who they do an extreme form of yoga where they never sit down. And this is even talked
Oh
about
God.
in the ancient Greek texts. They called them the gymnosophists, and they talk about how they would hang themselves from trees in order so that
Mm.
they don't let their legs rest. And what you'll see when you look at these characters, because like I got to see them in various levels of decay. So the legs will swell because like you meet young guys and then you meet the old guys. So the young
Mm.
guys, their legs are all swollen up and ballooning. And then the old guys, they become these literal black sticks, and they're just walking on sticks. But
Mm,
what these do is they smoke chillums with the people who come to offer prayers, at least at the temple that I went to. So you would wait, you would go up, they'd give you tilak, which is like a blessing. They put the three
mm,
lines of Shiva on your forehead, and then they
mm,
would smoke chillum with you, which is a special type of pipe, and you would
mm,
be smoking just pure cannabis, nothing in it. And yeah, these guys would be just smoking cannabis all day, and they call them the dancing bubbas because they're always bouncing like this on these
mm,
legs that are just in the most extreme form of pain. But the idea is that these guys have overcome the body. They don't feel the pain. They
mm,
are showing you that they don't need the body, and that the
mm,
more that they reject the body, the more they become transcendent. We see this
mm,
also, like, for example, in the Jain tradition. This is talked about explicitly. Like, a lot of people, when we talk about karma, we have a very Western understanding of karma. Karma is a lot more nuanced. For example, there's a physical form of karma called karma pugala. It's a literal thing that sticks to your soul and it weighs you down. It causes you to be pulled to the bottom of the earth. And this is a huge thing in Jainism, especially. And what the Jain monks want to do is they go through these extreme forms of austerity. A Jain is another type of monk who, when they enter the monastic tradition, it's to death, right?
mm,
They're engaged in these practices that eventually will destroy them. You know, you do this path in order to achieve enlightenment, and enlightenment ultimately usually happens at or just before death, right?
mm,
And they're engaging in these extreme forms of fructarian diets and real severe austerity, limiting of the self. But there's a belief is as they starve themselves and as their skin becomes more and more translucent, as they start to fade, that their spirit becomes visible and it literally transcends the body. So you'll see these images of these monks who are sitting in meditation with like a halo rising above them and or a snake rising above them, and this is actually their soul leaving the body because of their austerities.
mm.
You know, they're committing this kind of overcoming of the karma in order to
Yeah,
become the Tirthankara,
But
right?
we're
In the
yeah.
Jain tradition.
I
isn't
tell
it
you an
just
interesting little.
premature? I mean, it's going to happen anyway, right? So there will
Mm,
be
yeah,
sickness, decay, and death. First noble
Yeah,
truth. Why do you
yeah.
yeah.
have to have it in advance?
That's right.
Well, this
But
is why, like, go ahead,
this is
sorry.
also part. Sorry, like also part of the Jain philosophy, and it was really interesting
Mm,
because I gave a talk at the Parliament of World Religions when it was here in Australia, and a Jain lady came up later, and we were discussing Jainism. Um, Snakes and Ladders, the game,
mm,
is a Jain game. They
Oh,
invented
shoot.
that to show
Oh, wow.
that the soul will slide down the snakes and go up the ladders and climbs up again, and then. But this is the path of life: is snakes and ladders. It's a Jain game. Yeah, and yeah, they certainly realise that you can get. That's why they always have the one big snake that gets to the end quick and one big ladder that ascends quick. So you can shortcut it, but most people are just on the game, and they respect the fact that most people want to play the whole game, play the slow game, the long game,
I
and
think
play
I
it
want to
through.
enjoy my body for as long as possible, you
well,
know?
this
Well,
is the
they call it a game. They literally call life a game, and you're supposed to enjoy it. Yeah,
the
yeah.
understanding, right, in Jainism is that those who engage on this path of becoming the Tirthankara, you're talking about like 0.0001% of humanity,
Mm.
right?
Yeah,
Only
of
the most,
Jainers as well. Not all
exactly,
Jains
right?
do that.
Very,
Yeah.
very only, well, what you see with a lot of the Jains is they'll commit to taking on various forms of austerity. Like when I was in India, I met this Jain family where the mother refused to leave a certain square footage. She would only walk within a certain amount of space, basically from her house to the temple, and that was it. She'd ate an extraordinarily restricted diet, like not just vegan, but like pushing it. You know,
Mm,
they don't eat anything that is destroyed, right? The whole idea behind her version of Jainism is like you want to try and commit as ahimsa is the ultimate goal, absolute nonviolence, which is a
mm,
paradox. You can't be absolutely nonviolent in this world, which is
Mm.
why ultimately you have to become a monk who engages in austerity because you have to balance out your karma. But
mm,
for the rest of us, what we can do is two things. We can help for the Jains, you know, the lay people. The lay people, they're said to be a few incarnations before becoming on the path of a Tirthankara. Because you're a
mm,
Jain, you get to practice forms of austerity and you get to help the monks. So the monks will do things like, because they're trying to commit as little violence as possible, they can't just get their food. People have to get it for them. They can't even take the food from the tree. That would be a violent act. So someone has to go get the fruit for them. Someone has to cook the rice for them. You know,
Mm-hmm.
they can't just drink water, because to drink water would be to kill the bugs in the water. You got to boil the water, but the monk can't boil the water. Someone has to boil the water for the monks. So the whole monastic system
Well, so you need
requires this
somebody else
extreme.
who's unclean to be
Yeah,
clean. That
you need someone
Yeah.
else unclean to be clean. The only way that people can walk that Tirthankara path is with an entire lay system to support them. But we see this with
Mhm.
all monastic communities.
doesn't this
You know?
translate into being anti-woman? Because usually
Oh yeah.
when you
So
go
you get
off on
two.
a tangent
You get
like this, there's female slaves somewhere.
So, well, there's no slaves in the Jainism tradition, but there is some real
No.
backward thinking, but
Yeah.
only in some of this. Well, it's complicated. So you have two
Mhm.
major schools that have survived: the
Uh-huh.
Digambaras and the Shaitambaras. Okay, and the big difference between them is whether they'll accept women as monks and whether they'll accept certain things as possessions. So the idea was, in order to be on the Tirthankara path, you have to give up everything and swear a life of absolute nonviolence. So the question is can a woman be nonviolent? Well, some Jain philosophers say that the very nature of a woman's body means that she is killing babies in her period and stuff.
Oh
And they get
my.
into this weird stuff.
Oh
So
my.
women, but this is only one group,
One. Yeah,
one
that's
group,
right.
right?
Yeah.
They're very extreme, and they say that women can't become Tirthankaras. They have to be reincarnated as a man. Now, this is
Yeah.
not
Then
such an
there's a
intense,
whole school of thought that violence is exclusive to men,
right?
which is
Mm-hmm.
also totally weird.
Which is
Mm-hmm.
also totally weird, right? And insane. All these ideas are kind of, what have
Mm-hmm.
you. So what you do get too is that the same group that excludes women also excludes any form of possession at all. So their monks are entirely naked and they have nothing. Everything has to be done by the lay community.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas for the other group that allows women, they wear these long white robes, men and women, and they wear these covers over their face so that they don't accidentally kill bacteria or bugs. And they walk around with a broom and a dustpan so that they can sweep bugs and things out of their way. And they
Yeah.
have like a bowl to collect food in. But these
Yeah.
aren't considered possessions, right?
Yeah.
These are considered like it's all complicated.
Yeah. The lady that was talking to me at the Parliament of World Religions, who gave her talk on Jainism, she was a female
Right,
monk. Yeah. So
right.
yeah, there definitely are active female monks in the world still.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
still they're in fact the vast majority of Jains are allow the women, and
Mm-hmm.
it's and yeah, the vast majority of monks are women, so
Mm-hmm.
it's an interesting idea. It's just why I bring up the Jain for our talk of alchemy is they practice this kind of extraordinary form of an
Mm-hmm.
alchemical process, which is about achieving this form of ultimate freedom and enlightenment. The idea of the two, like they view the universe as kind of like a bottle. So the bottom is kind of like a triangle, and that's at the very bottom is hell. And then it comes
Mm-hmm.
into like a narrow peak, and then it goes up to the top. And the
Mm-hmm.
idea is that the Tirthankaras, when they remove their karma pugala, they
Mm-hmm.
float to the top. And then once you reach the top, you achieve omniscience, you
Mm-hmm.
know, omnipotent. You become akin to God,
Mm-hmm.
So their idea of God is many, because
Mm-hmm.
anyone can become that part of that unity, but you have to go through this process of ascendance and you have to leave the material behind, you
Yeah.
know.
Mm-hmm.
Just
Yeah,
wild,
I'm
wild stuff.
definitely with all of what we've discussed today, the middle way is a good way,
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, yeah. For example, right, like it's said in many of the traditions that the Buddha was a
Mm,
practitioner of Jainism. And so, right,
mm.
you'll get these images of him in the most extreme form of austerity with the
Right.
skin and the
The ribs
bones.
hanging
This
out,
was
yeah.
this is considered holy in Jainism. If you achieve that, now your skin is translucent, your spirit is leaving your body. That's the goal.
Yeah,
So the
yeah.
Buddha was considered to be the best of the Jains, but
Yeah, I
he
know. I do.
he gave up. He took the milk from so the story, one of the stories that
Right.
I
Right.
read, there are many versions. There's
He
a
got
story where,
he got hungry.
well, no, this is really important because this is an aspect of the middle path, and says his enlightenment, it's so the Buddha is
Mm,
engaging in the most insane form of extreme austerity under the
Mm,
Jains, right? Trying on this path unto death. And he's about to die, basically.
right.
And he passes out. He literally passes out. And a young girl comes up to him and offers him milk. And in the
Right.
version I read, he takes the cup from her, he drinks the milk, and in that moment, he achieves enlightenment because
Mm.
he gave up the extreme path and walked the middle path, and he
He
accepted
gave up
help.
the ego trip of the
Exactly.
extreme path.
exactly.
Yeah.
He accepted help. He
Yeah.
saw the beauty in another, and he stopped his extremism.
She's not
Mm,
unclean.
Right.
mm,
Exactly. Right. So there's all the beauty there where he rejects that extreme and he comes into this natural alignment, you know?
mm,
Mm.
But yeah. While but both of them are alchemical ideals, right? Alchemical traditions,
Mm.
about
mhm.
Mm.
developing this kind of magic
Mm.
power and
And that's the
ascending the tree.
using the lab of the body.
Right.
Yeah,
Using the lab of the body. And
Yeah.
yeah,
this is the thing, whether it's destroying the body or empowering the body, both are these alchemical processes of
Mm.
empowerment, which is
Mm.
what
yeah,
I find so
yeah.
surreal and wild.
There's an interesting Italian doctor wrote a book on anorexia nervosa in the clergy.
Mm.
That's the origin of ritualized anorexia nervosa is in clergy practice.
Mm,
And this doctor explained that physiologically it's exactly like heroin addiction.
Oh
mm,
man.
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, it's and removing the ego from a spiritual practice is really hard to do. So many people, the spiritual practice becomes the identity, rather than the spiritual practice serving the identity. It's one of those,
But people get
yeah,
high
tricky things.
off torturing themselves because the body is going to produce a whole bunch of endorphins when you do that.
Oh yeah, and
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 the
so and so it's the alchemy lab of the body to produce this drug that's
yeah,
going to give you the experience of
We
transcendence.
also get
and
into
the
this magic too here because like we also have to recognize like when you get into the heights of the extreme of ecstasy, it is also the heights of the extreme of terror. The vision of the angel is no different than the vision of the demon. And that monk who is denying himself is no different than the tantrika who is empowering themselves. They're both coming
mm,
to it from extremes, but it's
mm,
about that experience of the all and
Mm.
of transcending the limits of self. George Bataille talks about this a lot. Like George Bataille was a wild man. He was obsessed with this idea of self-destruction as a form of enlightenment. And this we see throughout the Greek tradition. Heracles doesn't achieve enlightenment till he's set on fire.
Oh my.
Astrea doesn't achieve enlightenment till she's set on fire, right? There's this idea that you have to die before you can transcend to the kingdom. And that in that final death is also that ultimate ecstasy of the orgasm. George Bataille, he had this picture of this person who was killed by the Chinese government under the communists, under this process called Lin Shi, which means death by 1,000 cuts. And he was obsessed with this image because the man who was receiving this torture was crying out in a state of ecstasy as he was dying. So that utter destruction, that ripping apart of the self, is that orphic experience of the transcendental all. So to die and to be ripped apart is to experience the ultimate orgasm, is to break free of reality and to come into the extreme ionic life. And this is the
mm,
left into its most intense. This is where the Agoris are going on that death path, right? So
mm,
this is one aspect of the alchemical tradition, but the alchemical tradition in its most absolute radical, where you are literally committing death. Like George Bataille,
Mostly it's about healing the body.
he tried to create a secret society called the Asaphael Society, and he wanted someone to cut his head off so that he could have that kind of transcendent death, but he could never find someone who would be willing to wield the axe.
mm,
Just a total wild man, you
Just
know,
mm,
another thing
right?
where somebody has to get dirty for you to get clean. It just doesn't make any sense.
mm,
Yeah, I can't, I mean, I try to understand these things and I've tried to kind of, engage. There's something about this idea of the taboo and of this accursed share. When we have too much decadence and when we have this bonds of law, there's this tendency for people to need to break them, to shatter them. And it's like, or there's a tendency for people to do the other, to extremify them, and either of these is as we've talked about, is breaking free of that middle path and is going to lead to a self-destruction. Now that self-destruction will be an ecstasy, but it will also be a death, right? This is the thing. Like, I don't think that's a transcendent form. I think that's leading yourself to another reincarnation where you're going to have to
Yeah.
walk the middle
See,
path
no,
eventually.
generally, the point of alchemy is not to die.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
but like, they're trying to ascend. They're trying to become free of the material. Gets into all this
I always
weird
wonder
stuff.
about what else was on the menu for that person. Like, what kind of options did they
Right,
have? Do they
right,
suffer from extreme depression that is never going away? What is their
Yeah.
situation that would be a choice?
right.
Mm.
There is all of this too. We also have to always remember and talk about that anthropological understanding of religion, where there is this constant idea of one-upmanship and proving oneself and the games of purity that we
Yeah.
constantly see over and
Yeah.
over and over again, right? One
All
person,
narratives around purity are fascist in origin.
right,
Oh,
right,
look,
like,
but it's around our diet today. How do you know if there's a
yeah,
vegan in the room? They'll tell you,
right,
because
right,
it's I'm better than you, and
yeah.
food is that purity thing that comes with food. Oh, I'm paleo, I'm keto, I'm better than you, and we have that in the church. Like the church
And
Yeah.
even
bans
there,
food.
somebody's got to get dirty. You know how many rabbits
Yeah.
die to get your vegetables?
And how do you start? Like, also, we got to remember just the reality of this kind of stuff. I remember reading
Mm,
this one anthropological book about this guy who went to India and he wanted to join one of these sadhu groups. And he spent like 10 years. He got in with the guru and he joined the group, but he wound up spending like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars and to get in and eventually moved to India to do all this stuff. And like, there's just all of the human reality, like the
It's too
reality of his
expensive
guru.
to be poor like that. Like Gandhi, it cost somebody a bunch of money to keep him in rags.
Exactly. This is the thing. In order for his master to live that guru lifestyle, there were people all over giving everything to that guru. And
mm,
he also needed a lot of help. Like this guy
mm.
was like that money went and did a lot of good,
Hey, did you
but
catch that about Epstein's brother running Burning Man?
you told me about this, which is just
What
so
the heck? And there's another situation where you got to pay $300 to be poor.
right. Right. And it's a perversion of traditional pagan rights and of
Yeah.
these freedom rights, right? To me, it's just like they took all that was beautiful about the hippie subculture and capitalized it, exploited it, and turned it
This
into
has
something
happened
that just,
gradually over
yeah,
time. In the
and
beginning, it was
destroyed
totally a hippie thing.
yeah. But now it's like it used to be about celebrating nature, and now
Yeah.
you guys are going out and destroying one of the
Wreck in the
last few
desert. Yeah.
places left for animals to be free, for nature to be pristine. It's sad now. And I mean,
Mm.
I understand why people want to go there. They want to experience what it was in the beginning because
Yeah.
that myth and that image
Totally.
is so beautiful, but that doesn't exist
But they
anymore.
don't want to be hippies.
No, they don't want to be
It's
hip.
just the same thing. You want to know what hookers know, but you don't want to have anything to do with any actual hookers, right?
No, that's
Yeah.
a good point. And the
Yeah.
hippie thing, it's a cult in its own right. It's a religion, it's a philosophy in its own right. Right? All
Mm.
these subcultures are, as Shay and
Yeah.
I discussed in our whole goth
There's
episode,
a,
you know,
there's a lot of reactivity there. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
And I only learned the other day why hippies are called hippies. Does anybody
Mm,
else know that? Because they used to go to Ithaca Park, right? And in Ithaca Park, all the hippeastrum flowers grew. And they used to put the hippeastrum flowers over their ears. So they were hippies because they were wearing hippieastrums. So there you go.
yeah.
It was an old hippie that told me that. And I was going, are you for real? And he's like, yeah, because we all used to wear hippieastrums, man. So
Right.
that's why you're a hippie.
And
Yeah.
it
So
was
these
this
big,
idea
they
too of being hip, right? Which is kind of
yeah.
funny,
Yeah, but that
being
comes
being
from
with
a
it.
hippeastrum flower, which is not a cool
Yeah.
flower anymore.
No, 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 no.
Uh,
Yeah.
There's
But
been
yeah,
some
no.
really good comments. There's been some really good comments today going
Oh, did
up.
you see one? Did you see one that we
Well,
should
they
highlight?
one person asked to make sure that Leslie was finished her presentation. So did you get to completely finish your presentation, Leslie?
Yeah, that was it. But there's no way to go through both at the same time. So I want to do another one where we just do the alchemical process.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We'll come back for part two. There was one question here that wanted you to explain a bit, if this doesn't go into your second lecture, a bit about the red and the green dragon that you had
Oh,
mentioned at
that's
the
next
beginning.
time. That's
That's
next
next
time.
time. So tune in next time, and you'll get into that red and green dragon. Because to
Yeah.
me, that that just immediately screams and sets off mythic parallels. The fire and the chloro,
Mhm.
right? The
Yeah.
Mhm.
goddess of spring, and then Hestia, the goddess of the
Yeah.
fire. I don't
And
know.
Merlin,
But these are
Merlin in the
solvents. These are solvents that you
Right.
use to turn a thing into another thing.
yeah,
Oh wow.
Merlin's first prophecy was about the red and the green dragons. So, or red and the white
Oh,
dragons, red and the white dragon. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
Mm.
interesting
So,
stuff. So, is
mm.
there anything though, Leslie, that you want to end with? Is there anything you want to tell us about alchemy and these historical characters that our audience should take with them?
That these are people just like you and me. They're not special and they're not smarter than you. They just have discipline,
Mm.
and it took a lot of courage. Nowadays it's legal. You can get a distillation kit online and screw around in your kitchen, and
Mm.
no one's gonna threaten you or kill you. So this
Mm.
might be a little less exciting, but you can do this, right? For the first time in history, we can all partake, and
Right,
why not? Why not?
right. Have you been following our dear friend Veldane on the Discord? He's a
Yeah,
good friend of
he's a
ours.
real alchemist.
He's a
Yeah,
real alchemist. He's making his rare sealed earth.
yeah, man.
Yeah, he's just telling you, just jumped in the you can do it yourself, right? So there you
Yeah.
go. Make your own stuff, figure it
He
out,
has to walk miles. It's
right?
Mm.
not easy. It's not like watching TV. He's out there in the elements with many, many pounds on his back. And
Right.
Mm.
and so yeah, it takes discipline, but it's actually really fun.
Mm.
It is really fun, and you can also approach it from many ways too, right? You can do I know you have your your idea, but you can even do it the allegorical alchemical way and achieve a lot that way as well, right? You can
It has its
expand your
purpose,
your your
yes.
philosophical understanding of reality too. There's a lot to be offered in all of these stories for
Yeah,
multiple levels.
yeah,
So go out and read, engage, and have fun. What about you,
yeah.
Shay? Any thoughts on alchemy and the beautiful people that we just discussed?
Like 100% agree with Leslie in that it is something we can all do. I had a beautiful friend, Barrington Vincent Sherman in Australia, and we used to do some alchemy together where we literally get some gold out of dirt. And it's quite a surprisingly simple thing to do. As long as you have a well ventilated room, keep the ventilation happening. It could be disastrous apart from that. Um, but yeah, the female tradition, how it started with women, I will
Mm,
bring next time. I'll dig out that Hypatia's heritage. I'll
Yeah.
and the fact that this is also about life extension, which shows that it's about stuff in the kitchen, but it is about an internal alchemical process as well, about weaving these opposites together to make a reality that is what we want, right? And
Yeah.
what will enrich us and empower us, which is what the alchemist is about.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
about freedom. Freedom.
Mm.
It's
Mhm.
all about freedom, right? That's the whole point of the magical tradition in general,
Yeah.
really. It's
Mhm.
about knowing the self and coming into true empowerment and
Yeah.
Yeah.
lifting the veil, right?
But watch
Engaging in
out.
reality.
You might wake up. You
You might
might
wake up.
change into
Yeah,
someone you didn't expect. You
right.
might find out that what you thought you wanted, you didn't want. You might find out that what you need is something else. It's a process.
No, I,
Oh gosh.
I've slept with women, I've slept with men. It doesn't matter.
Right, right.
See what I mean?
It's all a costume too, right? A lot of this, right? Like we're so more similar than we are different. If you
Yeah.
take
Yeah.
that time to really engage and to really, there's something that I'm really a big influence on me is the artist Genesis Peorage. And one of the things that
Mhm.
they talk about, and they kind of have a reformed version of the alchemy idea. They want to create what they call the pandragyne, the positive androgyne. And they
Mhm.
believe that this is both a universal and a personal quest, right? We're trying to create an occulted culture that'll lead us to this recreation of the highest form of self and a healing of the wounds of separation. And I just think
Mhm.
this is such a profound
I
idea, right?
believe that's the future. We've had our
Right?
matriarchal age, we've had our
Yeah.
patriarchal age, and now we need to get over it.
We need to
Mhm.
come into that new age of the child, right? We need to embrace the totality. We need to look at the universe with eyes of wonder, no longer bound by
Yeah,
tradition, but informed by them, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
beautiful.
Fantastic. Oh, what a
All
great
right, guys.
discussion, guys.
This
Oh,
was so
thank
much
you. I
fun.
love you guys so much.
Yeah,
Anything
yeah.
you want to
Privileged to
promote
be a part
here?
of this. Sorry.
Anything you want to promote or shout out before we call it here?
No, just if you're interested in this, I think I've got an article on. I've definitely got Hypatia on my YouTube channel. There's an in-depth dive on Hypatia on my channel. I think I've got one on the female alchemists, but I fully intend to do a deeper one based on the article that I wrote years ago. So yeah, if you want more information on Hypatia and that era, you go have a look at that article, YouTube clip, and I might put a link in the discussion for people to have a look
Yeah.
at.
And
Mhm.
I
Beautiful,
moved
beautiful.
to Crete on
Amazing.
just listening. I hear and obey. I got here 2 weeks before Mexico broke out into civil war. I mean, my spirits were just on me. Get the hell, go and get. And I'm going, what? I look crazy, right? Until I get here, and and then I'm like, oh wow, I don't look crazy
Mhm.
at all. So here I am. I'm in a different time zone, but I'm still doing sessions, and anybody can send me an email and book one.
Right. So if you look in the description, you can see Leslie's email there. It's Leslie Selene at Yahoo, Leslie.Selene, sorry, at yahoo.com. She does spiritual mediumship. So if you have any issues that you want to talk about magic, about connecting with your ancestors, about dealing with any kind of spirits, Leslie is the person to get in touch with. And we're going to be
Mhm.
doing a deep dive later on next week. We're going to be talking about Leslie's trip to Crete and her continuing writing.
Mhm.
You have been inspired by the spirits of Agiria and by
Yeah.
King Numa and have been
Yeah.
writing a long form series. Do you want to talk a little bit about that before we end here?
Well, book one, I finished it. I need a, if anybody is a copy editor, I need
Mhm.
you. If anybody is a formatter, desktop publishing person, I need you, and then we can put it up on Kindle, and it'll be beautiful. I'm working on book two right now. We're talking about the calendar and all that,
Right.
and yeah.
Beautiful stuff. And the series is called Becoming Numa. And as we know, King Numa is the founder of the Roman state religion and is inspired by the sister of Medea, Egeria. So lots of wild magic in that series. You can check it out. Leslie has a Substack. If you want to send me the link to that, I'll make sure that it gets shared to
Oh
people.
yeah, and if you want to read one of my books, I'll email it to you. No problem.
Exactly. You can also reach her at her email. All right, everyone. This has been great. So thank you guys so much.
Thanks, everybody.
So thank you, Shay. Thank you,
You're
Leslie.
welcome.
Peace and
Thanks for
love,
Yeah,
having
everyone.
us.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right. And
Bye.
we'll be
Thanks for
back
dropping
next week.
by.
All right. Take care. Much love.